everybody, Ellie here for WhoCulture. Happy Wednesday. I hope you all enjoyed the robot revolution. It's great to have new Who to discuss. It feels like ages since the Christmas special. Easter, so it's great to be back at it. Eggs. It's time for Easter eggs. Number 22. So the doctor arrives at the hospital to track Belinda down, and I'm not sure whether this was an intentional nod on Russell T Davies's part or not, but did anyone else get major partners in crime vibes from these scenes? Specifically the fact that the doctor only just keeps missing Belinda. It really felt like a callback to the opening of Partners in Crime, where the 10th Doctor only just keeps missing Donna. Honestly, it's a really funny idea, and I'd actually would have liked to have seen more of it in this episode. Number 21. So the doctor is still looking for Belinda, and so he tries to ask for her home address at the hospital's front desk. Now, what's interesting about the receptionist that he speaks to is that this is the same actress who appeared in The Church on Ruby Road. She plays the woman pushing the pram who the doctor encounters during the falling snowman scene. Now, we know that that snowman scene was actually a late pickup after Disney suggested that it would be a good idea to see the doctor earlier in the episode. So it's actually quite likely that having just worked with this actress, they decided to reuse her in another minor role as they moved on to filming season 2. Or, she might turn out to be the Rani or something. Who knows, honestly? Number 20. So we're still at the front desk, and the doctor pulls out the sonic screwdriver to try and access the computer system. Now the sonic here is yellow, which is the third different colour that we've seen the 15th sonic so far. There's the standard blue version that debuted in The Church on Ruby Road, and then we have this pink/red version that's appeared in a handful of episodes as well. Now I initially thought that they were matching sonic colours to the time period of the episode, which was the case with the time vortex during RTD1. In this instance, if the time vortex was red, then the TARDIS was travelling into the future, and if it was blue, then the TARDIS was travelling into the past. Now, for the most part, this does hold up. The Devil's Cord and Rogue, both episodes that are set in the past, featured the red sonic, whereas The Church on Ruby Road, Space Babies, and Dot and Bubble, which are all set in either the present day or the future, all featured the blue sonic screwdriver. But then, The Legend of Ruby Sunday and Empire of Death threw everything out of whack by featuring a yellow one. Now for this pattern to hold, I would have expected it to be blue in those episodes. So for now, it seems like the red sonic does feature in the past stories, and either a blue or yellow one for present day or future set stories. But we're going to keep an eye on this for the rest of the season to see if that continues. Also, did the doctor just shut off the entire hospital's life support system here? And yes, I know hospitals do have backups. Lots of people told me that in the comments section of our discussion video. It was just a joke. Number 19. So the robots break into Belinda's house, they murder a poor innocent cat, and then they show her the star certificate that Alan gave her 17 years ago. Now during this close-up of the certificate, we can see that it was registered on the 5th of April 2008. Now we've already spoken about Partners in Crime connections to this episode, and we have another one here. The 5th of April 2008 is the exact date that episode first aired. Now this was no doubt done on purpose, and could lend even more weight to the idea that the Doctor and Belinda missing each other in that initial scene was indeed a deliberate callback to Partners in Crime. Number 18. Sticking with Series 4 connections for a second, the certificate also reveals that Belinda's star is located in the constellation Orion. As noted by Wilfred Mott in the parallel world created during Turn Left, the stars in the Orion constellation all burnt out as a result of Davros detonating the reality bomb, which affects all parallel universes. Now it's interesting that there are a few links to Series 4 already, and it's even more interesting that there's a link with the Orion constellation burning up in the same episode where we're shown that the Earth, or at least its landmarks, have apparently crumbled. The season 2 finale is also called The Reality War. Could this connection to Davros and the reality bomb via Orion be significant? I told you in a previous video, Reality War just made me thought of detonate the reality bomb! Or it could be something or nothing. I guess we'll find out in 7 short weeks' time. Number 17. It's time for the first edition, folks, of Floodwatch, 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 Floodwatch. Last season we had Twist Watch, this season we have Flood Watch. Is Mrs. Flood going to be every companion's neighbour now? Now we don't get a whole lot in terms of helping us piece together the Mrs. Flood mystery here, but it is interesting how she sort of sends Belinda on her way like she knows this is meant to happen. It's not like she's overly concerned for Belinda's safety or worried about the robots in the garden. Now it's been apparent for some time now that Mrs. Flood possesses some form of higher power, and the fact that she's tracked down yet another one of the Doctor's companions, plus the return of those fourth wall breaks as well, only confirms this further. And we'll obviously be back with more Flood Watch next week, where we should hopefully start getting some more big clues and maybe even some answers. Number 16. After Mrs. Flood waves Belinda bye-bye, the robots stand her next to a big glowy lighty thing and we hear one of them say, "Transmat initiated." Now transmats have been a form of transport technology in Doctor Who for the past 50 years. First mentioned in the Ark in Space and seen in stories like The Armageddon Factor and Journey's End. Now transmat is also shorthand for a teleportation device in other sci-fi stories as well, not just Doctor Who, although Doctor Who does use it a lot. Number 15. Russell T Davies peppered a few Star Trek references into last year's season opener Space Babies, and it appears that he's done the same thing here. So as the robots transmat Belinda away, she yells, "They're beaming me up!" which is surely a nod to the catchphrase "Beam me up, Scotty" from the Star Trek franchise, in reference to Chief Engineer Montgomery Scott beaming people back to the Enterprise. But here's a fun fact for you, because this famous quote is actually a misquotation. The words "beam me up, Scotty" have never been spoken in that order in any Star Trek series or film. Number 14. So we arrive on the planet Miss Belinda Chandra 1 and are immediately struck by the colourful retro futuristic design of the city, the throne room, and then of course the robots and the spaceship that they arrive in. This was all very much deliberate, as the overall look of the episode was heavily influenced by 50s sci-fi movies like Forbidden Planet and This Island Earth, the latter of which was a major point of reference for Russell T Davies, which the design team then took on board. Number 13. Polish. I could not do this video without talking about everyone's new favourite robot now, could I? Now I'm going to keep calling him Polish, but this cute little guy right here is actually called Scoot. And like the robots and the design of the city and its interiors, Scoot was also influenced by that 50s look. Something I love, by the way. I love 50s style and fashion, so I'm living for all these references. Now it was specifically designed on 1950s cars and hardware, which was revealed by prop art director Michael Van Kesteren in a behind-the-scenes video. The constant repeating of Polish was also instantly reminiscent of Gadget from The Waters of Mars, which is an episode also written by Russell T Davies. Don't lie, it wasn't just me. You had the same thought as well. It was not just me that thought Gadget. Number 12. Queen Belinda is seated at her throne and is horrified to discover that the AI generator plans to turn her into a cyberwoman. And during the animation that follows, where we can see pieces of metal grafted to Belinda's skin, if you pay close attention to her finger, you can see that it's the wedding ring that serves as the power button for the machine that she would become. I think this is such a great little detail that subtly hints at the control over her if she was indeed married off to the AI generator, who of course we later learn is Belinda's control freak ex-boyfriend Alan. Number 11. The Doctor and Belinda are discussing the X-ray blankets, and the Doctor holds one of them up to his chest so we can see that he has two hearts. Now this is not the first time that we've seen an X-ray of the Doctor. The third Doctor also received one after crashing to Earth in Spearhead from Space, and as you'd expect, the Doctors were baffled at the whole two-heart situation. Now on the bottom right of the X-ray blanket we can also see the Doctor's medical information, and it's about as vague as you would expect. Name, unknown, sex, unknown, age indeterminable, blood type NA, diagnosis 2 hearts, status excellent. At least he's in good shape. Number 10. Sticking with this X-ray scene and the Doctor's cheeky response of "Padam" when Belinda notices his 2 hearts feels like it might be a nod to one-time 10th Doctor companion Astrid Peth, or more specifically to actress Kylie Minogue, who in 2023 released a song called Padam. We already know that the 15th Doctor is a Kylie fan based on his little dance routine in Rogue last year, so the reference even works in-universe as well as out of it. Number 9. The Doctor explains to Belinda that he's from a different planet before telling her that a mysterious he told him Belinda's name and that she would be important. Now underneath this scene you can hear what sounds like a little motif of Murray Gold's track This Is Gallifrey, which was used throughout the first Russell T Davies era whenever Gallifrey was shown or mentioned. Now it was also used in Space Babies as well during the early scene where the Doctor explains Gallifrey to Ruby.
They died. It was a genocide and they died.
The use of this music here could mean a couple of things. Of course, the Doctor is talking about his home planet, so it could simply just be a nod to that. But what if it also means that this mystery he is a Gallifreyan or a Time Lord? I mean, the odds are it was just the Doctor from the future, but we can't discount the possibility that other Time Lord characters will be involved as the season progresses. Number 8. He said the thing. Now I'm sure all of you immediately got this one, but I do have to mention it. Timey-wimey. The phrase was first used by the 10th Doctor in the 2007 episode Blink, most famously during the scene where he explains the complexities of time travel to a rather baffled Sally Sparrow. And since then, it's been used a few times, basically as shorthand for weird time travel stuff. Wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff. Now I already feel like Schwupp may follow in timey-wimey's footsteps, as in we'll all just say it to describe something weird happening. Anyone else get those vibes, or is Schwupp a one and done deal? Number 7. Throughout the episode, there are a few mentions of a fracture in time or a time fracture. Time Fracture was the name of the London immersive Doctor Who play/experience. Now here's the description to give you a rough idea of what it was about. A weapon of unknown origin destroys a small corner of Mayfair and simultaneously opens a rift in space and time. For decades, UNIT have fought undetected to protect the people of Earth from the dangers it poses. Now, I actually did Time Fracture twice, once with a friend of mine, and I also did it with the wonderful Sean Ferrick. In fact, it was the first time Sean and I met in person. It was such a wonderful experience. It was honestly a Whovian's dream come true. You know how you want to be in Doctor Who and press all the buttons and do all the fun things? That's basically what you got to do. But the story itself was really complex, really interesting. You went through all these different sets, and it did include Time Lords. I remember it ending on Gallifrey inside a Time Lord meeting room, and I believe it involved Rassilon being resurrected. I think Romana was involved in some way as well. So it really did tick every box in terms of making sure it included all of Doctor Who. It was an incredible thing, and it's such a shame that it ended as quickly as it did. I really hope they bring it back in some way. Now, honestly, I don't think the story of season 2 will be a rehash of Time Fracture, but it's still a fun little link, and it did make me think of it immediately as soon as I heard the words Time Fracture. It also feels very much like Russell just didn't want to say time crack or crack in time, because those are heavily associated words with the Stephen Moffat era, in particularly Series 5. Now, I'm going to talk a bit more about Series 5 a bit later, because there are a few more parallels between that and what's happening here in Season 2, so stay tuned. Number 6. The Doctor and Belinda are shocked to discover that the AI generator is actually Belinda's old boyfriend Alan, who was kidnapped by the robots after Belinda inadvertently sent them after him. Now, Belinda says that she thought Alan moved to Margate, to which he responds, Stargate. Now, of course, this is a nod to the sci-fi franchise Stargate, which began in 1994 with the movie of the same name, and then from there spawned a bunch of other movies and TV shows as well. My favourite? Stargate SG-1. Now, we know that Alan is a sci-fi fan, so he's clearly a fan of the Stargate franchise as well. Now, the Stargate itself is essentially a portal that allows intergalactic travel between two places, so it's good to see here that AI Alan hasn't lost his sense of humour at least. Number 5. So immediately after the Stargate joke, we see a flashback to when the robots kidnapped Alan. Now, on the wall of his bedroom, there's a poster for a fake film called Rocket to Venus. This is a clear homage to the 50s sci-fi films that influenced so much of this episode's aesthetic. This also reveals Alan to be a fan of those movies, which then further explains why he finds it so cool when the robots first take him to the planet. Also, if you take a look at that cast list, the first name on the poster, Luke Smith. Now, this could be a reference to the Luke Smith from the Sarah Jane Adventures, or it could be a reference to the person called Luke Smith who actually works on Doctor Who. I mean, I guess we'll never know, but I'm going to say it can be whatever you want it to be, especially if your name is Luke Smith. Number 4. So after the Doctor and Belinda say goodbye to the robots and the Miss Belinda Chandra kind, the Doctor ushers her into the TARDIS with "Let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go," for which he adopts a Scottish twang. Note how I didn't try and do the Scottish twang there. Now, as we know, Ncuti Gatwa was born in Rwanda, but he was actually raised in Scotland, which is where he studied drama and set out on the path to becoming the Doctor. So it's really lovely when we hear him slip into a Scottish accent from time to time. And this also works as a little nod to the long history of great Scottish actors who have played the Doctor. Number 3. So when the Doctor tries to take Belinda home at the end of the episode, we hear an unsettling, familiar sound effect as the TARDIS struggles to reach its destination. That is the same sound effect that we heard in the 60th anniversary specials and throughout season 1, a sound effect that we later learned was a result of Sutekh hiding on top of the TARDIS. Now this is likely just a reused sound effect to signify that the TARDIS is having a bit of trouble, rather than there being another villain sat on top of the TARDIS. But considering the involvement of gods in this era of Doctor Who, what if this sound effect is being used to represent interference from another member of the Pantheon? Maybe it's a different god who is stopping the TARDIS from reaching May 2025. Number 2. Speaking of sound effects that play when the Doctor is struggling to get Belinda home, this scene also sees the return of the cloister bell, also known as the WhoCulture Downs noise. The cloister bell was first introduced in the 1981 serial Logopolis and has been used many times since, basically to signal that the TARDIS or its passengers are in some form of danger. Number 1. Right at the end of the episode, we see that something is very, very wrong indeed, as a bunch of broken down Earth landmarks float through space, alongside a calendar counting down the days until the 24th of May 2025. Now, aside from being the date of the penultimate episode of the season, Wish World, the idea of the universe falling apart and a particular date being highly significant feels eerily similar to Series 5. Now, in that series, it's the 26th of June 2010, the date of Amy and Rory's wedding. That's the date on which the TARDIS explodes and the universe collapses. On the whole, the timey-wimey mysteries set up in the Robot Revolution do feel very similar to Series 5. Time fractures and cracks in time, reality breaking down, specific dates, and a companion being at the centre of it all. Let's just hope that Russell T Davies can wrap things up as satisfyingly as Stephen Moffat did back in 2010. Hello everybody, Ellie here for WhoCulture, and we are back with another Easter egg hunt, which is quite fitting seeing as it was just Easter weekend. Before I get into the Easter eggs for Lux though, I hope you've all noticed my wonderful t-shirt right here. And the good news is you can now grab your own t-shirts by clicking down below. And even more exciting, there will be more designs to come as well. So watch this space. We now have merch. I know, cool, right? Anyway, let's get into the Easter eggs for Lux. Whew, let me tell you, there's quite a lot of them. Number 37. So the cold open kicks off with everyone settling down in the cinema for the cartoon to begin, while Reginald Pye makes himself a cup of tea in the projectionist booth. Now, I don't know about anyone else, but I was initially a bit confused at that first shot lingering on the spoon because it made it seem all ominous for no apparent reason. But of course, we then see that the light bounces off of the spoon and into the projector, bringing Mr. Ring-a-Ding to life. Now, oddly enough, this isn't actually the first time we've seen a significant spoon in the 15th Doctor's era. Maestro reflected themselves in a spoon in The Devil's Cord, while a spoon literally saved the universe in Empire of Death, as it was the only piece of metal the Doctor could find after Sutekh, dusted everybody. The Doctor has taught us that we should never ignore a coincidence. But is there more to this other than it just being a really random connection between various members of the Pantheon? Honestly, I'm not so sure. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Is there more to these spoons? Number 36. So Mr. Pye goes and gets a film reel out of storage, fires the projector up, and the Mr. Ring-a-Ding cartoon begins. Now, I've already commented in the review and in the spoiler discussion how beautiful the cartoon animation is throughout this episode. In particular, the little touches like added film grain and flicker on Mr. Ring-a-Ding to make him feel authentically of the time. Now, Russell T Davies has revealed that Fleischer cartoons were a major inspiration behind the look and feel of Mr. Ring-a-Ding and his world. Fleischer Studios was founded in 1929 and was one of the biggest producers of theatrical cartoons during its time, with series like Betty Boop and Popeye. Now, you can certainly see the inspiration here, and looking back at some of these old cartoons further hammers home just how well Mr. Ring-a-Ding was executed. Number 35. It's only week 2, and we already have a repeat Easter egg. So as you'd expect, Mr. Pie has a bunch of movie posters on the walls of his projection room. And as the camera tracks the beam of moonlight that brings Mr. Ringerding to life, we get a clear shot of one of those posters, which is Rocket to Venus. The exact same poster that appeared on Alan's bedroom wall in the Robot Revolution. Now, I suppose you can't really blame them for reusing the asset if they had it lying around, and it does fit with the time period and the setting of this particular episode. Although, does this mean that we now have to start Rocket to Venus Watch as well as Flood Watch? We'll see if it shows up next week. Number 34. After the cold open, we join the Doctor and Belinda in the TARDIS, and we get the first of 2 very unexpected but very welcome musical callbacks. So straight after Belinda says, "I would really like to see them again," there are a few notes of an 11th Doctor era track.
Please.
These notes are essentially a different version of Amy Pond's theme, and feature at the start of the Series 5 track Roman Paradox. It was so great to hear this music again, but I'm not sure why a brief snippet of a Series 5 track was reused in Season 2. Maybe it was a sneaky hint of the meta madness to come, which we will get to later. Number 33. So after deciding to explore 1952 Miami, the Doctor and Belinda go for a change of clothing. And the way this scene was shot is an exact repeat of a similar scene in The Devil's Cord, where the Doctor and Ruby also go for a change of clothing. It seems like this is going to kind of be the standard now whenever a costume change is required. Although it would actually be nice to see the new TARDIS wardrobe one day. Now, another cool touch here is that the TARDIS light changes to match their outfits, being yellow and blue. Number 32. So sticking with these outfits for just a moment, and there are a couple of points of reference that went into designing them. For Belinda's dress, costume designer Pam Down looked at the iconic yellow dress worn by Anita in Steven Spielberg's 2021 adaptation of West Side Story, which, like Lux, is set in the 1950s. And for the Doctor's suit, Down looked at 50s American singers. We should probably also point out here that bow ties are cool. And it's nice to see the Doctor harking back to a previous incarnation, even if this wasn't the intention. Number 31. The Doctor and Belinda emerge from the TARDIS and are greeted by the Palazzo Theatre, where Belinda spots the name Rock Hudson headlining a movie called The Harvest Bringer. Rock Hudson was a real American movie star of the time and earned an Oscar nomination for lead actor for his work on the 1956 film Giant. Now, Belinda mentions that she learned of him while on her HIV training course. Hudson sadly passed away on October 2nd, 1985 at just 59 years of age. He was the first major American celebrity to die from an AIDS-related illness. Before returning to Doctor Who, Russell T Davies wrote the superb drama miniseries It's a Sin, which followed the lives of a group of gay men during the AIDS crisis in 1980s England, which then adds further depth to his decision here to highlight Rock Hudson in Lux. Number 30. The Doctor clearly wants to investigate the creepy old chained-up cinema, and so Belinda labels him Scooby-Doo, to which the Doctor responds, "Honey, I'm Velma." Now, there are actually a couple of Scooby-Doo nods in this episode. So obviously there's this one here, with the Doctor telling Belinda that he's the smart one, since Velma is the brains of the Scooby Gang. But then the latest scene of the Doctor and Belinda being animated was directly influenced by that Hanna-Barbera style of animation, Hanna-Barbera being the studio that produced the old Scooby-Doo cartoons. Number 29. So when the Doctor and Belinda are talking to Logan about the missing people in the diner, he says, "Some people say that a boat came in and took them to Cuba recruiting for Batista." Now, this is another historical reference. So in 1952, Fulgencio Batista, a former Cuban president and military leader, staged a coup and took control of the government and basically became a dictator, which then set the stage for the Cuban Revolution in 1953. Honestly, it's always really good when a Doctor Who episode also acts as a history lesson, informing the audience about certain events that they may not have been familiar with beforehand. I mean, I certainly wasn't familiar with who Batista was until I googled it after hearing his name in this episode. Number 28. And now we enter the fan scene. And there's about 1 billion Easter eggs in this bit, so buckle up, folks. So as the Doctor and Belinda first step out of the TV, on the left you can see a mug perched on top of the speaker. Now, it's very difficult to make out, but I'm fairly certain that's a weeping angel printed on the mug, which would then make sense as this is also the same mug that Lizzie then holds for the rest of the scene. And it's got the words, "Lizzie, don't blink," printed on the other side. Number 27. So the shot then cuts to Doctor Who mega fans Lizzie and Hassan, who can't quite believe their eyes. There was no surprise that Lizzie loves Blink, because on top of that Weeping Angel mug, she is also sat on a Weeping Angel cushion. You can just see its wings sticking out here, but we get a better look at it when Lizzie excitedly leans forward a few seconds later. Number 26 and number 25. So sticking with Lizzie, she's of course wearing a fez, which I'm sure all of you remember as a favourite accessory of the 11th Doctor. But fezes were also worn by the 13th Doctor in Kablam and the 7th Doctor in Silver Nemesis. Now she's also wearing a Cyberman shirt with the word Telos printed on it. Now I'm sure I don't need to explain the Cybermen to you lovely folks, but for those of you who might not be aware, as it hasn't actually been mentioned much in the modern series, Telos is one of the home planets of the Cybermen, first appearing in the iconic second Doctor story, Tomb of the Cybermen. Also, shout out to Lizzie's TARDIS blue fingernails as well. I thought that was a nice touch. Number 24 and number 23. So sitting next to Lizzie is Hassan, who's wearing a 4th Doctor scarf and a UNIT jumper. UNIT, of course, being the Unified Intelligence Task Force, the organisation led by Kate Stewart that defends Earth from alien threats. UNIT and Kate Stewart, along with Ruby Sunday, will return in the 4th episode of Season 2, Lucky Day. So I'm looking forward to seeing them guys again. Number 22 and number 21. The third fan is called Robin, who is wearing a Beep the Meep shirt. Hail to the Meep! And it's of the design first introduced in the 2023 episode, The Star Beast. She's also holding a 3rd Doctor sonic screwdriver, which, might I add, is an awesome design and may or may not be near the top of our upcoming ranking, so keep an eye out for that one, folks. This was the sonic that really set the template for the sonic screwdriver design and functions that we would see throughout the classic series and into the revival as well. So it was a good one to use in this meta homage to the show and to its fans. Number 20. Now let's look at the shelves in the background. And that, my friends, right there, that's a Slitheen. A Slitheen cameo in 2025. I mean, what a time to be alive, am I right? The Slitheen, aliens that wear human skin as camouflage, were first introduced 20 years ago in the first series of the revival. So maybe this was intended as a little 20th anniversary homage. Number 19. On the same shelf, but a little further down, there's another figurine of a revival-era monster, an Ood. Love an Ood. The Ood were first introduced in the 2nd series of the revival in The Impossible Planet and The Satan Pit. They were last seen opposite the 13th Doctor in Series 13 in 2021, and honestly, I'd love to see them come back again. Come on, Russell, bring back the Ood. Number 18. So that Slitheen and the Ood are perched in front of a whole bunch of Doctor Who physical media cases. So on the right we can see some of the lighter coloured classic collection box sets. For example, there's Season 9 with the 3rd Doctor and Season 2 with the 1st Doctor. Now there's a few other cases here that are quite difficult to make out, although you can see what appears to be Trial of a Time Lord DVD. There's that recognisable beam of blue light next to the 6th Doctor's head. And then further down, what appears to be the Key to Time box set, although the Slitheen is rudely getting in the way of that one. Number 17. So continuing with the physical media, the top shelf looks like it's home to all the fans' modern series DVDs and Blu-rays. For example, on some of the cases on the left, you can clearly make out the original 2005 revival Doctor Who logo. And you can also see on these shelves the 60th anniversary specials DVD as well. Number 16. So at the very top of the shelves, right at the back, is what looks like a Build-A-Bear teddy. Now I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that this is one of the Doctor Who Build-A-Bears. And while it's not clear exactly which Doctor it is, it looks like it could be the recent 14th Doctor edition that was launched around the 60th anniversary. But really, I just wanted an opportunity to show off my own Doctor Who bears. Number 15 to number 13. And now, just when you think things can't get any more meta, there are actually a few bits of 15th Doctor era marketing hidden around the fans' room. So on the shelf next to the DVDs is a promotional image of the 15th Doctor and Ruby Sunday from Season 1. Right at the top of the shelf, hidden behind some bits of crockery, is a poster of the 15th Doctor that was released in the run-up to the 60th anniversary, and on the wall behind the TV is the official vortexy, spirally artwork that accompanied the church on Ruby Road. Number 12. So sticking with posters and wall art, right at the back of the room next to the shelves is a somewhat questionable addition to the room's decor. A poster for Fine Time, complete with some artwork of a man trap. Now Fine Time was of course the name of the domed city in the season 1 episode Dot and Bubble, while the man traps were the hungry slug monsters created by the Dots to wipe out the city's annoying, vain residents. Number 11. So just beneath the Fine Time poster is a box of some sort that has all the Doctors displayed along the sides. This is the board game Doctor Who Time of the Daleks, which as you can see has all of the Doctors displayed along the sides. Now I feel like it's been ages since we've had a new Doctor Who board game, quite honestly. I think we need more Doctor Who board games. Russell, make it happen. Number 10. Jumping back to the fans themselves, and Lizzie exclaims, "Oh, this is so Galaxy Quest," upon discovering that the Doctor actually seems to be real. This is a nod to the classic 1999 comedy Galaxy Quest, in which the cast of a sci-fi TV series called Galaxy Quest are drawn into a real conflict with real aliens who believe that the TV show is a documentary. Now, this situation that we have here in Lux isn't really the same thing, but you can sort of see how the reference connects the idea of fictional characters being treated as real. Number 9 and number 8. The Doctor and Belinda sit down with the fans for a cuppa and a chin wag, and that means we have more mugs. So Hassan is holding a K9 mug, K9 of course being the Doctor's lovable robot dog, who we actually haven't seen in a Doctor Who episode since Journey's End in 2008, so it's been quite a while. Bring back K9 please. And then Robin's mug is Dalek themed. And in the post-credits scene, we can see that it's got a Dalek on one side, while the text on the other side reads, "Robin will be hydrated." All I'm wondering is why does it not say, "Would you care for some tea?" Quite honestly, rookie mistake, props team. Rookie mistake. Number 7 and number 6. So the Doctor asks the fans what their favourite Doctor Who adventure is, and we get a couple of fun references here. The fans immediately respond Blink, and insist on Blink a few times even when the Doctor suggests other options. Written by Stephen Moffat, Blink first aired in 2007 and was the debut story for the Weeping Angels, and is almost always at the top or near the top of fan polls ranking the best Doctor Who episodes. So I read this moment as Russell T Davies having a cheeky pop at Stephen Moffat about the fact that his episodes are always voted the best. The other adventures that the Doctor suggests are the one with the goblins, obviously the church on Ruby Road, the one where he meets the Beatles, the Devil's Cord, and the one where he stood on a landmine, Boom, which incidentally was another Moffat episode. Number 5, and the scene ends with some very familiar music indeed, a reprise of Murray Gold's Series 5 track, The Sad Man with a Box. Now, most notably this track played in the Series 5 finale, The Big Bang, just as Eleven is saying goodbye to Amy Pond before flying the Pandorica into the exploding TARDIS. And then a portion then plays later on when he's telling little Amelia the famous "we're all stories in the end, just make it a good one, a story," which is quite fitting for this moment, I feel, where the fans reveal that they're actually fictional.
Brand new and ancient, and the bluest blue.
Number 4. After Mr. Ringading ascends to the heavens, Belinda is curious about how light could have killed him, saying, "But he was made of light." To which the Doctor responds, "We're 60% water and we can still drown." Now this is an almost direct lift from another Russell T Davies penned episode, Tooth and Claw, which incidentally was also the second episode of the second series. Now at the end of that episode, the Doctor and Rose amplify the moonlight to defeat the werewolf. And Rose questions how this is possible, saying, "But the wolf needs moonlight, it's made by moonlight." To which the Doctor responds, "You're 70% water and you can still drown." First of all, where has 10% of our water gone? And second of all, this was either intentional or one of those things lurking at the back of Russell T Davies' mind that he didn't realise that he'd already done before. Also, while we're talking about Tooth and Claw, that moonshot at the beginning of the episode gave me major Tooth and Claw vibes. Honestly, Tooth and Claw is such a great episode. I think it's a really underrated episode. Number 3. So in the very same shot, just behind Belinda, is a Doctor Who cast and crew Easter egg. That man there in the blue suit is Richard Price, who you've almost certainly seen at some point as he's appeared in the background of countless Doctor Who episodes over the years, including as a photographer in the Lazarus Experiment and a soldier in The Doctor's Daughter. He was also behind Cyber and Sea Devil masks in The Timeless Children, Legend of the Sea Devils, and The Power of the Doctor, and no doubt many episodes to come in the future as well. Number 2. Now it's time for this week's Flood Watch. Flood Watch. Flood Watch. There's a lot more to glean from her cameo this week than there was last week. Now obviously the big question is, how can she travel in time? Does she have a TARDIS, or is she so powerful that she can just appear anywhere at will? There's also her ominous prophecy that the show ends May 24th. Now it seems she's talking about the Doctor himself here, as this would track with her line about the Doctor's story ending in absolute terror in Empire of Death. But what's interesting is May 24th isn't the date of the season 2 finale. It's the date of the penultimate episode, Wish World. So is the Doctor going to be taken out of action in some way in that story? Like how 11 was sealed inside the Pandorica in the Series 5 penultimate episode? It would certainly be one hell of a lead into the finale if the Doctor was killed or something along those lines, wouldn't it? Number 1. The episode ends with something incredibly rare for Doctor Who. A post-credits scene. Now the scene shows that the 3 fans did actually survive the events of the episode, and they all burst out laughing as they realise they're still alive. Now in addition, though Robin previously said that they're the types of characters who don't get surnames, in the credits, they do have surnames. Lizzie Abel, Hassan Chowdhury, and Robin Gossage. Now with so much meta fourth wall breaking shenanigans in Doctor Who lately, the fact that we're shown their survival does make me wonder if they'll be important going forward. The 3 people does spring to mind that mention of a threefold deity of malice, mischief and misery by Harriet Arbinger in The Legend of Ruby Sunday. And there are also plenty of theories about the gods of Ragnarok, a trio of gods that demand entertainment which could connect with the 3 fans watching TV in Lux. Now the gods of Ragnarok would also make a lot of sense considering we have the Interstellar Song Contest coming up. 3 sneaky gods creating this big cosmic talent show to lure the Doctor is exactly the sort of out there twist you could imagine Russell T Davies pulling off. Hello everybody, Ellie here for WhoCulture, and the time has come to find some Easter eggs for episode 3 of season 2 of Doctor Who The Well. Let's just get into them, shall we? So, number 20. Another week, another costume changing scene. Now, last week we discussed how the way these scenes are shot is a direct lift from a similar scene in last season's The Devil's Cord. And the same is true again here with this scene as well. But there is a bonus Easter egg this time as well, because we have the Britney Spears song Toxic. Now, this track has appeared in Russell T Davies' Doctor Who before. It was first used in the 2005 episode The End of the World, which is set on a space station in the far future. Now, Lady Cassandra played it from her iPod, or more accurately her jukebox, and claimed that it was a traditional ballad from planet Earth. Now, what's extra fun about this callback is that the same model of Cassandra's jukebox also appears in the 15th Doctor's TARDIS. And in the January 2024 edition of Doctor Who magazine, it was also confirmed that 15's jukebox featured Tainted Love by Soft Cell, which is yet another track that plays on Cassandra's jukebox in The End of the World. So could they be the same jukebox? Or could they just have similar track lists? Or maybe the TARDIS simply remembered the songs and the style from Cassandra's jukebox and then copied them over when it reconstructed the console room for the 15th Doctor. Either way, don't be surprised if we hear more traditional Earth ballads in another season 2 episode. Just saying. Number 19. As with last week's episode, there's a bunch of musical callbacks in The Well, which is not really surprising considering its major links to a past episode. But one of the more subtle can be heard as the Doctor and Belinda fall from the spaceship at the start of the episode. So as they land on the surface of the planet, there are a few quiet notes of Murray Gold's track, The Doctor's Theme, played on the piano. Now, this track served as the Doctor's primary musical motif, mainly between 2005 and 2010, but it has also appeared a few times since then as well. Now, its use here has a double meaning. I mean, as the Doctor's theme throughout modern Who, it does make sense that it would play for the 15th Doctor as well. But since this theme is primarily associated with the 9th and 10th Doctors, I would say its use here could be looked at as a subtle hint to the Well's connection with a 10th Doctor episode. Number 18. They actually did it! And no, I'm not talking about making a Midnight sequel. I am talking about finally putting the 15th Doctor in a quarry. Now, this may sound like a bit of an odd Easter egg, but quarries are weirdly intrinsically tied to the identity of Doctor Who, going all the way back through the classic series. Now, whether you're talking about The Hand of Fear, or The Waters of Mars, or the dozens of other stories that filmed in quarries, it's kind of a running joke that so many alien planets seem to look like quarries. And it's almost a rite of passage for a Doctor to get their first one. So now, Ncuti can finally check quarries off of his list. This particular quarry is Pant Quarry in Bridgend, Wales, which was most recently seen in Jodie Whittaker's final story, The Power of the Doctor. Number 17. Quarries and music aren't the only returnees this week. We also get another use of the psychic paper. First introduced in Series 1 of the 2005 revival, the psychic paper is basically magic ID. When shown to a person, it shows them whatever the Doctor wishes them to see. In this case, that the Doctor is of a higher rank than the squadron leader. 15 has used the psychic paper before in episodes like The Church on Ruby Road and Rogue, and it's been used by every other revival Doctor as well. Never been used in front of Belinda though, which is probably why she looks a little bit confused by this. Number 16. So after the Doctor uses the psychic paper and gains the trust of platoon leader Shia Castellian, she explains to him why they can't return to the ship right away, which is largely because the planet's atmosphere is charged with galvanic radiation. Now, if that rang a bell somewhere in the back of your brain, that's because galvanic radiation and galvanic energy has been mentioned in Doctor Who before. Now, it was of course mentioned in the original Midnight episode as a feature of the planet Midnight, so those who noticed its mention here might have started to put two and two together about where the well actually takes place. But much more easy to forget is the galvanic beam in the Giggle. You know, that enormous gun perched on top of Unit Tower that was commandeered by the Toymaker and then used to kill the 14th Doctor, who then of course bi-generated into the 15th Doctor. It's an interesting link between the Gatwa and Tennant Doctors. Galvanic energy created the 15th Doctor, but it's also a feature of the planet that terrifies the 10th and 15th Doctors the most. Number 15. So the Doctor, Belinda and the squadron enter the base and discover that everyone is dead and the whole place is a mess. The design of this base is reminiscent of other modern base under siege stories like The Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit and Under the Lake Before the Flood. But what you probably didn't realise is that it actually has more in common with the recent 15th Doctor episode Joy to the World, and that is because certain parts of the Time Hotel set were straight up recycled for use in the well. Now, the most obvious parts are the circular doors of the Time Hotel rooms and the mining base's bedrooms. But a lot more sneaky are these giant metal supports inside the base's main room, which also served as supports inside the Time Hotel lobby. Now, we often joke about Doctor Who constantly reusing the same locations and sets, but credit where credit's due, because it's a great way to both cut down on waste and keep the production more efficient. Number 14. As everyone explores the base and realises that there aren't any signs of life, Belinda questions what the plan is if they don't find anyone alive. To which Cassio coldly replies, "Nuke this site from orbit." Now, this echoes a famous line spoken by Sigourney Weaver's Ripley in the 1986 movie Aliens, where she suggests that nuking the site from orbit is the only way to be sure that the xenomorph threat has been neutralized. And speaking of the Alien franchise, Shia is sacrificed at the end of the well, very similar to the way Ripley threw herself into a vat of lava in Alien 3. So maybe the team had Alien on their mind while making this episode. Maybe. Number 13. Throughout the base, you can see a logo of the letter G dotted on various surfaces, and this represents the Gestetta Mining Company, the company that presumably ran this base and oversaw the mining operation around the well. Now, what's funny about its logo is that it may actually be a nod to another popular BBC One Saturday night show, namely Gladiators. Just take a look at the logo for Gladiators, and then take a look at the logo for Gestetta Mining Company, and you can see that they are practically identical. Tell me they're not identical. Now, of course, this could merely be a coincidence, or there could be a massive fan of Gladiators working on the Doctor Who art department. And let's not forget that there was a Doctor Who Gladiators crossover during the marketing for this season. Number 12. We arrive in the room where most of the episode is set, and we meet Alice Fenley, played by this week's Archer on Up, Rose Ayling-Ellis. Now, after Alice tells the troopers her name, her and the Doctor have a silent conversation in British Sign Language, which Shire tells them not to do. Now, it's a moment that further leans into the themes of paranoia and distrust within the episode. And though you might have expected the conversation to be subtitled for us viewers who don't know sign language, it actually wasn't. So, what are they saying? Well, I reached out to a friend of the channel, Peter Langton, who is very familiar with BSL, and this is what he told me the translation of the conversation is. So the Doctor says, "Calm down, don't be scared," to which Alice responds, "They all have guns." The Doctor says, "Have I?" "No, trust me," and Alice says, "Thank you." And I would like to say a big thank you to Peter for helping me work all of this out. Number 11, and speaking of the BSL seen throughout this episode, the Doctor does have something of a history with BSL. It was first used in the Series 9 story Under the Lake and Before the Flood, which weirdly enough was also set in a dark and dingy mining base. Cass, who was second in command of the base, was deaf and she communicated via BSL. Now the 12th Doctor initially says that he can speak BSL, but then he immediately realises that he's forgotten how. But clearly sometime between the 12th and 15th incarnations, he's got some practice in. And it's actually nice to think that his inability to communicate with Cass made him want to learn BSL in case he needed it in the future. Number 10. Belinda offers to patch up Alice's arm and Mo gives her a basic med kit. And Belinda doesn't really recognise any of the stuff within that kit, except for Similin. Now the reason she knows what Similin is because it was also used back on Miss Belinda Chandra 1 in the IV bags in the underground base. Number 9. So the Doctor, Cassio and Shire head to Central Control. And just like the quarry earlier in the episode, this is another location that may be familiar to long-time viewers. So along with the earlier shot of the squadron arriving outside the base, these scenes at Central Control were filmed at Liberty Steel in Wales, which is something of an old favourite when it comes to Doctor Who filming locations. Formerly known as Maya Steel and Alpha Steel, this location was used in episodes like Planet of the Dead, where it doubled as the Tritovor ship interior, and A Christmas Carol, where it served as the cold metal streets of Sardic Town. 3 things are inevitable in Doctor Who: Daleks, quarries, and steelworks. Number 8. So we're still in Central Control, and here we learn a bit more about Shire and her backstory. Now she tells the Doctor that she was brought up in the Wildlands. So this could just be a general description of an area of a planet. But we have heard of a place called the Wildlands before in the Series 3 episode Utopia. Here, Professor Yana tells the 10th Doctor that the message calling them to Utopia came from far beyond the Condorcet Wilderness, out towards the Wildlands and the Dark Matter Reefs. Now Utopia is set way further in the future than the Well, but it's not inconceivable that a place called the Wildlands would still be around at that point in the future. Number 7. As Shire is telling the Doctor the history of the planet they're on, we get more early clues about the imminent surprise midnight twist. So she tells him that all the galvanic radiation came from the planet's sun, which has since collapsed and is now known as a grey star. But before it collapsed, it was known as an extonic star. The only other time extonic stars have been mentioned in Doctor Who is, that's right, in Midnight, where we learn that the planet is turning around an extonic star. Professor Hobbs reveals that the extonic rays that come from the star are essentially raw galvanic radiation. So in other words, stay off the surface of the planet or you'll be melted into a pile of goop. Those who didn't pick up on the midnight twist at this stage would surely have done so at the mention of diamonds a few seconds later, as the only time we've seen Midnight, its surface was completely covered in diamonds. Number 6. The Doctor is horrified to discover that he is on Midnight and wastes no time in sprinting back to the main room to check on Alice, Belinda and the rest of the crew. And on his way, he runs past a box on the floor that has some very recognisable markings on it, for those who might remember Wild Blue Yonder. That is the same language seen throughout that episode on the alien spaceship, and was designed to look this way as the captain was horse-like, and so the crew thought that maybe a horse's hooves could make these scratches and circular symbols. I'm not sure that there's any relevance to this beyond it being a piece of reused set dressing, or maybe it was sneakily placed here to make us think that the not things were the villains of this episode. Who knows? Honestly, who knows? Number 5. Speaking of the midnight twist scene, this is where we arrive at the next major musical callback in this episode. To further immerse us back into the fear of midnight and the fear of the midnight entity, we have the return of Murray Gold's theme for that episode, which is on the Series 4 soundtrack and is titled simply Midnight. Now, unlike the rather random choice of using a Series 5 track in Lux, the return of this theme was entirely fitting for this episode. The familiarity of it helps the audience to remember the terror of the previous story, but it also has such a fast-paced, erratic tempo and tone that even without any recognition, it still puts you on the edge of your seat. Either way, I'm just super pumped to be hearing some of my favourite tracks making a comeback in 2025. Number 4. Now, I had to talk about this one because it gives me an opportunity to mention River Song, the best character. The Doctor is talking to the entity, and while we don't know exactly what it said to him, the Doctor does reveal that it knows his name. Now, assuming that this means the Doctor's true name rather than just the Doctor, this makes the Midnight Entity one of only a few beings to know that information. River Song is, of course, one of those, as we learned in her very first story when she whispers it to the 10th Doctor. I assume that the Time Lords probably know his name too, because they wanted him to say it in the time of the Doctor so that they know that they had the right universe to come to. Now, also remember that in the original Midnight, the entity completely possessed the Doctor. So it was likely at this point that it was able to learn more about him and then use that information to taunt him 400,000 years later. Number 3. As Shire sends 2 of her troopers into the airlock to get Alice to safety, there's a rather chilling and very deliberate detail shown in the next shot. So as the camera pans over to the info panel next to the airlock, you can see that it clearly displays 4 people inside the airlock, even though only 3 people went into it. So did the entity ever actually leave Alice's back? Is it on one of the other troops? Did it duplicate itself, or was there more than one of them? Or is this a production mistake? Honestly, I doubt it, considering how prominently and deliberately this shot is displayed. So it more than likely means that there's something inside the elevator along with these 3 people. Now, along with the cliffhanger, it's another clue that suggests there might be more to come from the Midnight Entity in the future. Either that, or Russell T Davies simply wanted to play into those themes of paranoia a bit more and have us questioning what exactly happened to the entity. Now, for an episode all about paranoia, it's very clever to instill that feeling in your audience as well, so well done. Number 2, it's the moment you've all been waiting for, folks. It is time for this week's Flood Watch, Flood Watch, Flood Watch. So here she's playing the leader of the squadron, presumably squadron leader Chinchappa, who was mentioned at the start of the episode. Now, she asks Mo if the Doctor was using a Vindicator, before ominously declaring, "That's exactly what I needed to know." Now, obviously, the big new detail we learn here is that Mrs. Flood has knowledge of the Vindicator, and seems to be quite interested in it. Now, if we assume that Vindicators are some sort of Time Lord / Gallifreyan technology, then this could be a major clue that Mrs. Flood is someone very close to home for the Doctor. Literally. Now, it's also interesting that she calls it a Vindicator, because in Lux, the Doctor seemed to make that name up on the spot. So then how does Mrs. Flood know about it? Has she somehow got eyes and ears in the TARDIS? Did she get that word from the Doctor maybe in the future? Or is Mrs. Flood a fellow Time Lord, and possibly Vindicated essentially is a Gallifreyan slang term? It seems we're going to get a key piece of information each week, so perhaps by the end of Lucky Day, which is the midpoint of the season, maybe we'll be able to paint a clearer picture of who Mrs. Flood is and what the hell she's up to. Number 1. Now, it's not often that there's an Easter egg in the episode's credits, but this week, there is. So first of all, we should mention this rather spooky detail just before the credits roll. There's been a lot of conversation about whether the Midnight Entity is indeed attached to Mo's back in the cliffhanger, or whether it's just residual paranoia. But if you listen closely, right as the episode cuts to black, you can hear something whispering. The same whispering the entity does throughout the episode. A detail intended to add one final scare, or confirmation that Mo is the entity's new host. I mean, let me know what you think in the comments down below. What does it mean? And then, as for the credits themselves, you might have noticed that the actor who played the entity, Paul Casey, is credited as It Has No Name. It's nice to see that even the end credits are keeping up with the mystery and the illusion surrounding the entity. Could you imagine if they'd given it a name in the credits and just spoilt the whole thing? Hello everybody, Ellie here for WhoCulture, and it is time for another Easter eggs video for season 2 of Doctor Who. This week we are going to be talking about Lucky Day. Before I begin though, unfortunately I didn't time it very well and mine is in the wash, but you can now get your hands on some WhoCulture merch. Below the video you can get to our shop and you can purchase our WhoCulture t-shirts. And as I've mentioned, we will have some more designs coming soon as well, and if you do purchase one, then do tag us in any photos in them because we would love to see them. Anyway, shall we get into the Easter eggs for Lucky Day? Number 29. So the episode opens on New Year's Day 2007, where the Doctor and Belinda arrive in London to do their vindicating. Now on the bin next to them are a bunch of New Year's Eve posters, and also a poster for something called Carols in Camden. Now this is an Easter egg that dates all the way back to the Christmas Invasion, which was the first Christmas special in the modern series. Now if you check the wall behind the 10th Doctor as he stumbles out of the TARDIS at the start of that episode, oh, what's that? Oh yeah, that's right, it's the exact same Carols in Camden poster. In addition, there was also an advert for Carols in Camden on the side of Wilfred Mott's little kiosk in Voyage of the Damned. That's so cool. Number 28. Curious Conrad stumbles across the Doctor's TARDIS and follows him inside a spooky, abandoned shopping mall, where the Shriek marks him for death. Now first of all, we all thought those mannequins were going to be something to do with the Autons, didn't we? Don't lie, you thought it too. We all thought this was going to be an Auton story. And secondly, one of the details in this scene does indeed hark back to an early 2005 revival story. In this case, the 2006 Christmas special, The Runaway Bride. The store Chez Allison, visible just behind Conrad's head at the end of the scene, is the same store that Donna Noble tells the 10th Doctor that she got her wedding dress from. Number 27. So sticking with this scene, and let's talk about the Shriek. Not the Shrek, the Shriek. Although how cool would it be if we did see Shrek in Doctor Who? Next season. So while this is the first time that we've seen the Shriek on screen, their appearance in this episode was cleverly foreshadowed in the 2024 Doctor Who novel Caged, written by Una McCormack. Now in the novel, Ruby describes some of her adventures with the Doctor, and she says, "I've visited other worlds besides yours. I've sung to kings, held space babies, shouted at ambulances, outrun a Shriek." It's a neat reference for fans of the expanded media, and it's a very thoughtful detail by the writers and editors of the book. Number 26. So last week we mentioned a few reused filming locations in The Well, and unsurprisingly there are more this week as well. The abandoned shopping centre that Conrad is walking through here is the same location as the Henrik's department store that we see in Rose. Now it's also the same location as the department store in the 11th Doctor episode Closing Time. And in addition, the alleyway where the TARDIS lands outside of the department store in Lucky Day is the exact same alleyway where the 9th Doctor lands the TARDIS in the Series 1 episode, The Empty Child. So if you thought this looked familiar, that will be why. Number 25. So we don't know his name or his true agenda at this stage, but the episode now introduces us to Jordan Lang, an employee at UNIT. Now the surname Lang is actually something of a Pete McTighe Easter egg, as the character Adam Lang had one of the main roles in McTighe's previous Doctor Who story, Praxeus. Now maybe McTighe even intended for them to be related, or maybe he just likes the surname Lang. Who knows? Number 24 and 23. So Conrad invites Ruby on his podcast, and in his podcast room there's a bunch of newspaper clippings and photographs on the wall. Conrad must be a massive fan of early modern Who, because one of those photographs is a direct screen cap from the Series 2 episode Fear Her, specifically the opening scene where the Doctor does a not so great job at parking the TARDIS. And another one of the photographs is from the Series 1 episode Aliens of London, from the scene where we see the news reports of the London UFO crash. It's always funny when shows and movies use screen captures as supposed in-universe photographs. Number 22. The absolute icon that is Cherry Sunday warns Ruby to be very careful before she heads out on her weekend village trip with Conrad, which Carla explains away by saying she just watched The Wicker Man. Now, The Wicker Man is a 1973 folk horror movie about a man who heads to a remote island off the coast of Scotland to investigate the disappearance of a young girl. And while there, he encounters all sorts of strange goings-on, and spoiler alert, I guess, he is eventually sealed inside a giant Wicker Man statue statue and burned alive. Now, it's obviously a bit of an exaggerated joke about how Cherry thinks those small country villages are all a bit dodgy. And hey, credit where credit's due. Ruby certainly did encounter a bunch of dodgy people, though they were a lot closer to home than anyone could have realised at this point. Number 21. Conrad takes Ruby to the local pub for a few drinks with his mates, and here we get a cameo from a classic Doctor Who actor. So the man who runs the pub, Alfie, is played by Paul Jericho, who previously played the high-ranking Time Lord Castellan in Arc of Infinity and The Five Doctors. Number 20. It's the return of Kate Stewart. Woohoo! And when she's on the phone to Ruby, she tells her that Mel is busy dealing with something in Sydney Harbour. Now, this is almost certainly something to do with the upcoming spin-off, The War Between the Land and the Sea, which revolves around UNIT and the Sea Devils. And given that the Sea Devils are aquatic foes, some sort of incident happening at Sydney Harbour would make a lot of sense. Now, The War Between the Land and the Sea has also been co-written by Pete McTighe, who wrote Lucky Day, so you can imagine that he might want to get in a quick nod to his next project in this episode. Now, on the other hand, we don't actually know if Mel is set to appear in The War Between the Land and the Sea, so this could actually be set up for the Season 2 finale, which we do know she will be a part of. Now, Sydney Harbour is where the Sydney Opera House is located, and given all those Earth landmarks floating through space at the end of the Robot Revolution, maybe there's something happening there related to the season arc, as opposed to the spin-off. Number 19. Kate is still on the phone with Ruby, and on the right-hand side of the shot, you can see a picture of her father, Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart. The Brigadier was one of the founding fathers of UNIT, and was a key recurring figure throughout much of the classic Doctor Who series, particularly in the 1970s. Now, his last Doctor Who appearance was in the 1989 serial Battlefield, though he did also pop up in an episode of the Sarah Jane Adventures in 2008 as well. This particular photo on Kate's desk is actually a promo image from Battlefield, proving that once again Doctor Who characters love using images from the show. Number 18. Conrad reveals himself to be the biggest scumbag in the universe, and we learn that he's not a sweet and innocent podcaster, but rather the leader of a group called Think Tank, which aims to expose the lies perpetuated by UNIT. Now, the name Think Tank harks all the way back to the 1970s and the Fourth Doctor's first story, Robot. Here, the organisation Think Tank was on the surface a perfectly above-board leader in scientific research and robotics, but in reality, its members were part of the Scientific Reform Society, which wanted to reform the world and rule it as a scientific elite, and planned to use the powerful K1 robot to destroy all who oppose them. Now, it's not entirely clear if this is meant to be the same think tank, as the two versions are very, very different. Although, the reveal scene in Lucky Day does feature what appears to be a musical callback to Robot. So make of that what you will, I guess. Perhaps Conrad and his allies are deliberately revitalizing an old enemy of UNIT. Regardless, though, of whether or not they're meant to be the same, the Brigadier's description of Think Tank as a bunch of cranks in Robot definitely applies in both cases. Number 17 to number 15. Conrad is still droning on and on about how UNIT lies, and he rattles off a series of Doctor Who monsters that he believes are fake, saying that there are no Cybermen, no Sycorax, and no Yetis in the underground. The Cybermen, of course, big metal robot dudes, probably don't need to explain what those are to you. The Sycorax, though, are a bit more obscure. They were the villains in the 2005 Christmas special, The Christmas Invasion, and they conducted a very public invasion of planet Earth, so it does make sense for Conrad to bring them up here, as they're one of the aliens the general public would be most familiar with. Then we have Yetis in the underground, which is the best reference of the lot, which refers back to the 1968 second Doctor story, The Web of Fear, which featured robot Yetis created by the Great Intelligence and took place in the London Underground. Pretty sure Kate Stewart mentioned Yetis in The Giggle. In fact, yes, she did mention Yetis in The Giggle. Number 14. Trinity Wells returns. It's a signature detail of Russell T Davies's Doctor Who for there to be all these snippets of in-universe news reports. He's been doing it right from the beginning of the 2005 revival, and someone who's always been part of these clips is American newsreader Trinity Wells. She first appeared in Aliens of London, reporting on the events of the UFO crashing into the Thames, and then went on to appear in stories like The Sounds of Drums, The End of Time, and most recently in The Giggle, where she had left her job job at AMNN, an American news network, to go solo. Now, it is a little bit sad to see that she now appears in support of people like Conrad, but it's always good to see Trinity Wells in Doctor Who. Number 13 to number 11. Now, this same sequence of news and TV show clips features a few people that maybe our non-UK viewers might not be familiar with. None of these people are actors playing fictional characters like Trinity Wells. These are all real TV personalities in the UK, playing themselves basically. So first up is BBC newsreader Rita Chakrabarti, TV presenter Joel Dommett, most famous for presenting The Masked Singer, along with a brief clip of Jonathan Ross, and then the One Show host Alex Jones. Now, The One Show is the BBC's regular early evening chat show and has had plenty of Doctor Who stars as guests over the years, including Russell T Davies himself. In fact, Jonah Hauer-King noted how it was so odd for him to go on The One Show as his character, having been on the show as himself as an actor in the past. Number 10. Conrad continues his smear campaign against UNIT and even goes so far as to publicly release the names and addresses of all UNIT employees. And during these scenes, we see a lot of social media pages and lots of names of social media users, including one for a user called Cheryl.Smith, who lives in Cardiff, which is Doctor Who's home base. Fittingly then, the profile picture for Cheryl.Smith is the real-life profile picture of Doctor Who graphic designer Georgie O'Boy. Now, Georgie assumably worked on the design team for all of these social media overlays and decided, you know what, I'm going to insert my own profile picture here. And quite honestly, who wouldn't do the same if we had the opportunity to put ourselves in Doctor Who? It wasn't me. Number 9. Everyone arrives at Unit Tower and Kate questions why the Shriek containment cube is outside on the helipad. And the Colonel, that is Colonel Sexy, tells her that it's because they've been ordered to send it to Geneva, which is a nod to the history of UNIT, with Geneva traditionally being the location of UNIT HQ. Number 8. Kate tells the team that the government is essentially raiding UNIT's inventory and notes how catastrophic it could be if UNIT's advanced tech went public. And she specifically mentions a time window and a transduction drive. Now, we saw UNIT's time window in action during the Season 1 finale, which allowed them to essentially travel back to the night Ruby was left at the church on Ruby Road. But the transduction drive is a little bit more interesting, as this may be Time Lord technology. A transduction barrier is a protective shield around Gallifrey that stops outside forces from entering and was an important plot point in the 4th Doctor story, The Invasion of Time. Now, it would be pretty cool if UNIT had somehow acquired Time Lord technology, or had engineered something that mimicked Time Lord technology. The time window certainly proved that they're capable, and this would also create a really interesting conflict between them and the Doctor. Alternatively though, the transduction drive might have nothing to do with Gallifrey whatsoever. But either way, maybe its mention here is foreshadowing for its potential use in the finale? Maybe? Number 7. So Ruby's final outfit in this episode is a pinstripe waistcoat and pinstripe trousers, and according to actress Millie Gibson, this may have been a nod to a certain Time Lord Victorious. As Gibson told Radio Times, quote, "My favourite outfit is towards the end of the episode. I genuinely thought they dressed me like David Tennant. I had a pinstripe waistcoat and pinstripe pants, and then a white shirt. I was literally just like David Tennant." Well, the 10th Doctor did of course love his pinstripes, with both his dark suit and his blue suit featuring them. And Ruby's outfit here certainly does feel 10th Doctor-esque. I don't know, maybe the costume designers knew that Millie was a fan of David Tennant and did this on purpose. Or maybe it was a total accident. Still, big up the pinstripes. We need more pinstripes in Doctor Who. Number 6. So we're still inside Unit Tower, and remember that we mentioned AMNN a minute or two ago? The American News Network and former employer of Trinity Wells is still in operation in the modern day and can be spotted on one of the giant screens inside the tower, reporting on the ongoing protests outside Unit headquarters. Number 5. So Kate and the rest of the UNIT team discover that Jordan is the mole who leaked all of their names and addresses and is actually aligned with Conrad. So they pull up his profile and discover quite a few concerning signs, including his subscriptions to dozens of radical blogs and also to something called Albion TV. Now, this is a reference to the Albion political party introduced in last season's 73 Yards, which was headed by Roger Ap Gwilliam, whose plan involved putting the world at risk of nuclear war. Needless to say, he was more than a little bit insane. Now, since the Albion Party and Roger Ap Gwilliam don't rise to power for another few decades, the Albion TV mentioned in Lucky Day is presumably some sort of precursor before the operation gained widespread political momentum. You can even see the Albion Party's slogan just to the right of Jordan's profile: bigger, better, bolder Britain. Number 4. Conrad infiltrates unit with the help of the big old traitor Jordan Lang, and as he rides the lift to the top of the building, we get this very specific shot of the lift from above. If this tickled something in your brain, it's because this type of lift shot is something of an icon in modern Doctor Who. It first appeared in the first episode of the revival, Rose, and was then literally reused in stories like World War III, New Earth, Doomsday, and even Torchwood Children of Earth. Basically, whenever a lift shot was needed, the team simply copy and pasted the original. And given its legendary status, I have no doubt that this similar shot in Lucky Day was a conscious choice on the part of the crew. Number 3. Now, the containment cube holding the Shriek is labelled as number 47. The number 47 is something of a running joke / recurring theme in the Star Trek franchise, and we know that Russell T Davies has enjoyed sprinkling some Star Trek eggies into these recent seasons. In fact, this isn't the first time the number 47 has appeared in relation to Unit, as it was also seen on the tail of the helicopter that transports 14 and Donna to Unit HQ in The Giggle, as well as on a poster earlier on in that episode as well. Number 2. Spoilers, sweeties! So the episode ends with the great scene between Conrad and the Doctor, where the Doctor does not hold back in his anger, even going so far as to reveal how and when Conrad dies. And we all immediately noticed when he said spoilers, right?
Do you want spoilers?
Even if it wasn't actually intended as a reference, that word has become so associated with River Song, the best character, that it automatically defaults to a reference every time we hear it. It became River's catchphrase from her very first appearance in Silence in the Library, where she refused to tell the Doctor any details about his future and would simply respond, spoilers. Number 1. It's that time of week again, folks. The latest edition of Flood Watch, Flood Watch, Flood Watch. So in this episode, she plays the governor of the prison Conrad is being held in, and lets him out of his cell because he's presumably part of her grand plan in some way. So there's a couple of possibilities and clues to mention here. First up is the fact that governor is actually capitalized in the episode's subtitles. Now, this could mean absolutely nothing, but it could also mean that she isn't just talking about the role she's currently playing, but that governor is maybe her title, like how various Time Lord characters have titles like the Master, the Doctor, the Corsair, and the Rani. Now, the Rani is essentially a renegade Time Lord similar to the Master, and weirdly enough, there is actually a link with the Rani and prison governors, as she assumed the role of prison governor in the Big Finish audio drama Planet of the Rani. That's a bit obscure and likely wasn't intentional, even if Mrs. Flood does turn out to be the Rani, but it would be quite a fun coincidence nonetheless, wouldn't it? Now, there's also the link with the prison governor in The End of Time, who conspired to bring the Saxon Master back to life. This again could be an unintentional link, but we do know that a mysterious someone picked up the Toymaker's gold tooth, which had the Master trapped inside. So could this be a hint that that someone was Mrs. Flood? What this scene would also appear to confirm is that Mrs. Flood is a villainous character, because there's been some debate as to whether she's actually good or evil. But surely aligning herself with Conrad leaves us with no doubt that she's opposed to the Doctor, right? As always though, let us know your theories down in the comments about Mrs. Flood, and we'll be back next week for more Flood Watch! Hello everybody, Ellie here for WhoCulture, and welcome to another video covering some Easter eggs. This week, of course, we are talking about the story and the engine. Before I start with the Easter eggs though, I'm just showing off my lovely t-shirt here, which you also can purchase if you just look below this video where you can purchase your very own WhoCulture t-shirt. And as I have said in previous videos, we will have more designs coming very soon, so keep your eyes peeled for those as well. It's so exciting. Anyway, shall we get on to some Easter eggs? Number 36. So let's start by talking about the writer Inua Ellams and the overall concept of this episode. Ellams is a playwright, poet, and former schoolmate of our very own Mr. Sean Ferrick, oddly enough. Now, his most famous work prior to working for Doctor Who was the play The Barbershop Chronicles, which explores similar ideas of the barbershop being a safe space for men, and particularly black men, to talk, share stories, and to be more vulnerable than they would otherwise be. Now, it was the barbershop Barbershop Chronicles that actually gave Russell T Davies the idea to have Ellams write for Doctor Who, with Russell T Davies's main idea being, what if the Doctor had walked into that barbershop? Now, the characters in the story in the engine are all brand new, and the story is of course original, but the play and the episode do have strong thematic connective tissue, and the play can very much be looked at as the original seed for this episode. Number 35. But sticking with the Barbershop Chronicles for a moment, the play and the episode are connected in one other significant way. Michael Balogun and Sule Rimi, who play Obioma and Omo in the story and the engine, both had roles in the play, making this episode something of a Barbershop Chronicles reunion. Number 34, and sticking with the idea of cast reunions, this episode was also a Doctor Who reunion for some of the actors. Sule Rimi, along with Aryan Bakari, who plays the barber, have both appeared in Doctor Who before. Rimi first appeared all the way back in the 2005 episode Aliens of London as one of the unit soldiers who encounters Space Pig in the hospital, and this was apparently the first day of filming on the 2005 revival, so it's incredible to think that he was right there at the start of the journey. Meanwhile, Aryan Bakari's first Doctor Who role was as the alien Leandro in the 2015 episode The Woman Who Lived, where he squared off against Peter Capaldi's 12th Doctor. And they're not alone either. Michelle Asante, who plays Abena, previously appeared in the 12th Doctor episode In the Forest of the Night, while Stefan Adegbola, who plays Rashid, popped up in The Magician's Apprentice as a newsreader. What a small world. Number 33. So inside the barbershop, the Doctor is amazed by the story window, noting how it throws up a visual interpretation of the story that's being told. And to test it out, he name drops a few villains: Daleks, Cybermen, and Weeping Angels, while later, when bolted into the barber's chair, he also mentions Weeping Angels again and Ice Warriors. Now, these are all iconic Doctor Who villains that have one thing in common. 15 hasn't encountered any of them, though you have to imagine that Ncuti will face a Dalek or two by the end of his run, and if he fails to do so, he'll be the only mainline modern Doctor to date that hasn't had a Dalek story. And we're not counting the 14th Doctor here, because come on, that's David Tennant and he's met tons of Daleks. And actually, while we're here, isn't it a bit risky to invoke the Weeping Angels? An image of an angel can become an angel, so the Doctor came very close here to making this a Weeping Angel story by accident. Number 32. Folks, it's your favourite time of week. It's time for Flood Watch! Flood Watch! Flood Watch! So this is Mrs. Flood's most fleeting cameo so far, showing up at the hospital where Belinda works to get her pills. Now, the most interesting thing this week is that she appears in a story that's being told by the Doctor, so perhaps this means that he is aware of her or knows more than he's letting on. Or this could just be a detail that only us viewers see. Either way, if Mrs. Flood appeared on the story screen in the barbershop and the Doctor saw her, that could be very significant. Remember that he has actually met and spoken to Mrs. Flood before in the church on Ruby Road, so he does know who she is. It's also interesting that Mrs. Flood is so devoted to being in character that she actually heads to the hospital to pick up some pills. She's not just putting on a show for the Doctor, she's living this life. Or maybe it's the companions that she's keeping tabs on for some reason. Now, there's also this theory that we've had for quite some time that Mrs. Flood is the god of stories, and maybe the ability to appear in this random story being told by the Doctor suggests that she has power over them in some way. I mean, on the plus side, with only one episode to go until the two-part finale, answers are imminent. So once again, let us know your latest theories in the comments, and we'll see you again next week for what could be an absolutely huge edition of Flood Watch! Number 31. So it's not just Mrs. Flood this week. There are quite a few cameos in this episode, including a whole bunch of past Doctors, but we'll get to those later on. The cameo that is easiest to miss is during the bustling market sequence where Belinda goes to seek out the Doctor. The merchant who confronts her and says she must pay for the items that she's knocked over is none other than the writer of this episode, Inua Ellams. Now, the idea for him to play this role started when he made a joke about it at one of the script meetings, and from there the idea swiftly became a reality. Although, considering that he's been a Doctor Who fan his whole life, I'm not convinced that he was joking. You were totally fishing for a cameo, Inua. Don't lie. And you know what? I can't really blame him, because I'd do the same. It wasn't me, okay? I want my chance. That wasn't it. Number 30. Continuing with the cameos, and we have perhaps the most surprising of the lot, Captain Poppy from Space Babies. This is the little girl Belinda encounters in the street, who swiftly disappears into thin air. Now, at the end of the episode, the Doctor chalks it up to stories leaking out of the barbershop and everything getting mixed up. But there is undoubtedly more to it than that. Now, what's interesting is that the events of Space Babies were essentially a story created by the ship. At one point in the episode, Ruby notes that it's a children's story come to life, while later on her suspicions are confirmed when we learn that the software created the bogeyman. So there's a clear theme here of stories coming to life, which again could then lend credence to the God of Stories idea. Throw in all the fourth wall breaks and things like the Doctor believing music to be non-diegetic and somehow having the ability to yell cut on Mr. Ring-a-Ding, and it all feels like it's leading to something big. Now, one crazy idea is that maybe the entire 15th Doctor era has been one big story created by a higher power like the God of Stories or Mrs. Flood. And alternatively, it could be something as simple as Captain Poppy being part of the Doctor's team in the finale, along the lines of his team in A Good Man Goes to War, you know, like his own Avengers Assemble. Either way, let's hope Space Babies isn't too important. Number 29. So the Doctor is debunking the barber's claim that he's all those different story lords, and he mentions that he knows the Norse goddess Saga, and that they watched all the Marvel movies together up until Avengers Endgame. Now, first of all, it's funny that the Doctor stopped with Endgame, because perhaps that's when he knew that the quality of the MCU took a hit, as we all know as well. Endgame also released in 2019, which is the same year that this episode is set, so this could be a little nod to that and him not giving any spoilers of what's to come. But the funniest thing about this reference are all the ways that Doctor Who is connected with the MCU. First of all, there's the fact that Unit Tower is a clear rip-off of the Avengers Tower, so how hasn't the Doctor pointed that out yet, if he's aware of the MCU? And then of course there are all the Doctor Who actors who have had roles in the MCU. I can only imagine the Doctor's reaction when he saw Clara, Amy, the Dream Lord, the First Doctor, and the Ninth Doctor playing MCU characters. Not to mention one of the nodes from Silence in the Library in the first Thor movie, or Barclay from Planet of the Dead in Black Panther. Again, small but large world. Number 28. The barber is talking about all the places he gathered stories from when he was getting started with the Nexus, mentioning places like a candlelit pub and a church confession box. But most notable are his mentions of an electric cinema and a space opera, which are accompanied by visuals of the Palazzo Cinema from Lux and the robot's ship from the Robot Revolution. Now, these could be hand-waved away as nothing more than visual cues to illustrate what the barber is saying. But it could also be yet another hint of the 15th Doctor being trapped inside a story, or his era being one big story created by a villain or a god. This was very clearly a deliberate choice to get us all talking, but I guess we'll have to wait and see whether it's a red herring or whether it means something more. Number 27. The best cameo in the episode is undoubtedly Joe Martin's fugitive doctor, who we learn was the Doctor who encountered Anansi and his daughter Abena. Now, the fugitive doctor was introduced in the 2020 episode Fugitive of the Jadoon, and over several appearances we've learned that she was an operative for the Division, which is essentially Time Lord MI6. At one point though, she tried to desert her post and, as the name suggests, became a fugitive. That's really all we know about the fugitive doctor, which is presumably what her cheeky line, "I was busy in a different story that might be finished one day," is a nod to. It seems even the showrunners know how underdeveloped she is, so perhaps this quick cameo is a hint of further things to come. There's a neat little costuming detail here as well, because the fugitive doctor's standard multicolored shirt has been swapped for a plain orange one instead, which maintains more of a visual continuity with the Doctor's orange top. Number 26. The Doctor and Belinda make their way to the story engine, and there are a bunch of interesting items and artifacts scattered around the room. Now, visible on one of the shelves are the Ernest Hemingway books, The Old Man and the Sea, A Movable Feast, and To Have and Have Not. Hemingway is one of those classic novelists that you'd imagine would be perfect for a celebrity historical one day, although we do learn that the 15th Doctor has already met him, so maybe that opportunity has already passed. The idea of Hemingway and the Doctor telling each other six-word stories is somewhat rooted in reality as well, and draws on an old, if unsubstantiated, anecdote in which Hemingway is said to have claimed that he could write a short story in only 6 words. I'm born, I die, I'm born. I mean, that one will take some beating. Number 25. So a little later on in the scene, a much more unusual artifact can be spotted. A copy of the Jumanji board game. As seen in the original Jumanji movie from 1995, the idea of the game is that it sucks in and traps the people who play it. In an episode all about stories and stories coming to life, it's a very fitting addition. Props to the prop team for this one. Well done. Number 24. Continuing with the literary references in the scene, next to one of the TV screens is what appears to be figurines of Mole, Badger and Ratty from The Wind and the Willows. Written by Kenneth Grahame, The Wind and the Willows is a truly iconic children's book that was first published in 1908 and has continued to endure in the form of TV series, films, stage shows and radio productions. So it fits right in here in terms of being an important story for generations of children and families, just like Doctor Who itself. Number 23. More references to classic stories now, although this one is a lot darker in tone. It's only properly visible in behind-the-scenes material, but on one of the shelves is a piece of paper inside a typewriter, upon which you can see the line, "All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy," repeated over and over. Though that phrase has existed previously, its inclusion here is undoubtedly a reference to Stanley Kubrick's legendary 1980 horror film The Shining, during which Jack Nicholson's character Jack Torrance goes crazy and attacks his family. And in one scene, his wife finds pages and pages of the phrase, "All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy," typed out with a typewriter. Number 22, also on one of the shelves in the engine room, is a Disney connection, specifically the Enchanted Rose from the 1991 animated classic Beauty and the Beast. In the movie, the rose acts as the Beast's hourglass of sorts, requiring him to find true love before the last petal falls, lest he be stuck in his beastly form forevermore. Now, I'm not sure there's any deeper significance to its inclusion here other than it being another reference to a classic story, but the fact that it's a Disney story does make it a bit more notable, and of course, a big theme in Beauty and the Beast is books and reading and storytelling. Now here's a big chunk. We've got number 21 all the way to number 2. So the Doctor connects himself to the story engine and we get a good old-fashioned Doctor Who clip show. Now we've seen these a gazillion times before in episodes like The Next Doctor, The 11th Hour and The Timeless Children. And it's always fun to see which particular clips they decide to use. So where are all these clips from? Now the first clip is from the 1967 serial Tomb of the Cybermen, during the scene where the second Doctor and his companion Victoria discuss their families. The second clip is a brief shot of the third Doctor from the 1970 serial Spearhead from Space, which was the third Doctor's first story. Next, we jump to Modern Who and Christopher Eccleston's ninth Doctor, who delivers his iconic "Just this once, everybody lives" speech from the 2005 episode The Doctor Dances. And funnily enough, in the story in the engine, everybody lives. Now sticking with Modern Who and sticking with speeches, the next clip visible in the background on a small TV is of the 10th Doctor's "I'm the Doctor" speech from the 2007 Christmas special Voyage of the Damned. Next is another modern speech, perhaps the greatest one of all. This is the 12th Doctor's incredible monologue on the futility of war, taken from the end of the 2015 episode The Zygon Inversion. Now given everything that's going on in the world today, I think this was perhaps the most intentional clip choice of the lot. The 13th Doctor is next, who is shown while the 12th Doctor's speech is playing in the background, and this is a clip from her final story, The Power of the Doctor, taken from the scene where she shares one final ice cream with Yaz on top of the TARDIS, and presumably sitting on top of Sutekh. 13 then gets a separate audio clip as well, the line, "When people need help, I never refuse." That can be heard immediately after the Power of the Doctor clip. This is from her very first episode, The Woman Who Fell to Earth, when she talks to Grace and Graham just before she builds her sonic screwdriver.
When people need help, I never refuse. When people need help, I never refuse.
Now it's interesting because this then means that 13's clips are from her first and last stories. The next clip is audio only and jumps back to Classic Who for the 5th Doctor's line, "I'm definitely not the man I was," from the 1983 story The Five Doctors, which is heard just after he says goodbye to his previous incarnations.
I'm definitely not the man I was. I'm definitely not the man I was.
Then we see the 11th Doctor, who laughs at Amy's "the ultimate ginge" joke from the end of the 2010 episode Vincent and the Doctor. The scene then jumps to the barbershop itself, and on the giant story screen we first see an iconic shot of Tom Baker's 4th Doctor from the 1975 serial Pyramids of Mars, which was possibly a little nod to the whole Sutekh thing in season 1. Sutekh, of course, first appearing in Pyramids of Mars. Next we see Paul McGann's 8th Doctor from the 2013 minisode The Night of the Doctor, a clip taken from the opening scene where he appears on board Cass's ship. And this is followed up by a shot of William Hartnell as the first Doctor from the 1963 serial The Daleks. We then jump back to the story engine room and back to the fifth Doctor, who gets a visible clip this time, and it's again taken from the end of the Five Doctors, just as he watches his previous incarnations fly away in their TARDISes. And on the same TV screen immediately after the fifth Doctor, we see a clip of the sixth Doctor from The Trial of a Time Lord. This is the season-long story that comprises season 23 of the classic series, and it was as close as Doctor Who is probably ever going to get to a full-on courtroom drama. Then a few seconds later, we get a 14th Doctor clip hidden very sneakily in the background. This is a shot from The Giggle from right at the end of the episode when he enjoys an outdoor meal with Mel, Donna, and the rest of the Noble family. This shot is also visible later on behind the 15th Doctor. And then next up is the 15th Doctor, again nestled in the background behind Belinda. And this is a shot from right at the end of the church on Ruby Road, which was also repeated in Space Babies, where the Doctor tells Ruby, "I'm the Doctor." Again, this shot is visible a little bit later on, tucked away behind the 15th Doctor. There's another 15th Doctor shot up next, and this one is literally 1 frame long. This is pulled from the end of the season 1 episode Boom, right before the Doctor and Ruby say their farewells to Mundy and Splice. Another sneaky one is up next in this same shot of the barber, and on the same TV screen as the Boom shot, this is the first Doctor's iconic farewell speech to his granddaughter Susan in the 1964 serial The Dalek Invasion of Earth. The only mainline Doctor not represented in this scene is the 7th Doctor, but thanks to behind-the-scenes photos we do know that he was present, he just didn't make it into the cut. The scene in question is from the 1988 story Remembrance of the Daleks, from the scene where the Doctor confronts Davros. And number 1. So right at the end of the episode, the barber says to Omo that he doesn't even have a name that people can trust, and so Omo gives him his father's name, Adetokunbo. Now in the Yoruba ethnic group in Nigeria, the name Adetokunbo symbolizes a clan or familial connection to nobility, and is also linked to how the Yoruba people strive to preserve cultural identity through language, music, and storytelling. One of the themes of the story and the engine is about finding somewhere to belong, and we see this in the Doctor's connection to Omo's barbershop, but also in the barber's desire to be recognized by the gods and to take what he sees as his rightful throne. The barber also lacks an identity of his own and tells tall tales about how he's all these mighty and fearsome story lords. So the fact that his new name can be linked to both family, nobility, and the idea of preserving identity through storytelling is a really, really lovely touch. Hello everybody, Ellie here for WhoCulture, and we are back for another breakdown / Easter eggs video for season 2 of Doctor Who. Before we get into that though, if you haven't already checked out our shop, we do have some WhoCulture t-shirts available. We will have some more designs coming in the future as well. Didn't time it very well, don't have mine on at the moment, but please do go check out that store. It's available just below this video. And if you do purchase one, then please do tag us in any photos because we would love to see it. Number 26. So the episode opens and we meet the host of the Interstellar Song Contest, Rylan. Now, for our non-UK viewers who are probably unaware, Rylan is a big TV personality here in Britain, who originally came to prominence as a contestant on the 2012 edition of the talent show The X Factor. And since then, he's presented just about everything under the sun. And since 2018, has served as semi-final co-commentator of the Eurovision Song Contest. He's also a massive Doctor Who fan. And yes, his teeth really are that sparkly. Number 25. So hosting the song contest alongside Rylan is Sabine, a member of a cat-like species who ends up a little worse for wear by the time the episode draws to a close. Now, Sabine's cat-like design could be viewed as a little nod to the cat-kind species used throughout Russell T Davies's first Doctor Who era. But mainly, Sabine is surely a nod to Doja Cat's unusual and incredibly eye-catching look from the 2023 Met Gala. I mean, look, they look identical. The 2023 Met Gala was in May 2023, which was right when the Interstellar Song Contest would have been in the planning stages. So it wouldn't be surprising if this viral moment caught the attention of the Doctor Who team. Number 24 to number 22. So immediately after the opening title sequence, the episode cuts to the gallery, and on one of the screens we can see some of the planets that the song contest is broadcast to. One of these is Alpha Centauri, home of the Alpha Centauran race that was first introduced in the 1972 story The Curse of Peladon. Now, Alpha Centaurans are large green aliens with one huge eye, and modern viewers might remember a cameo from the Alpha Centauran diplomat Alpha Centauri at the end of the 12th Doctor story Empress of Mars. Another planet visible in the gallery is the Zygon New Colony. Now, Zygons are shape-shifting humanoids first introduced all the way back in the 1975 story Terror of the Zygons, and they were last seen in the 2015 12th Doctor story The Zygon Invasion / The Zygon Inversion, which concluded with millions of Zygons living peacefully and secretly on Earth, disguised as humans. Now, the inclusion of a Zygon New Colony here would perhaps confirm that at some point after the end of their last story, the Zygons who were living on Earth left the planet and found a place of their own to call home, no doubt with the aid of the Doctor. And the other planet that references the show's history is Trion, first mentioned in the 1984 story Planet of Fire as the home world of 5th Doctor companion Vizsla Turlo. Cora also claims to be from Trion, but we later learn that she's actually from Hellier. Number 21. Sticking with planet Easter eggs for a second, and the next one is the most unexpected of the lot. So we're still in the gallery, and on the main screen, the feed cuts from Rylan on stage to a shot of a large blue planet with a beaming sun in the background. And this isn't just a planet we've seen in Doctor Who before, it's literally a reused piece of footage that we've seen in the show before. This is Trenzalore, which was introduced in the 11th Doctor's era as the final resting place of the Doctor. And the Series 7 finale, The Name of the Doctor, saw him and Clara actually visit that resting place, before Clara throws herself into the Doctor's time stream, scattering herself throughout his history. This footage from the Interstellar Song Contest, though, is taken from Trenzalore's next appearance in Eleven's final story, The Time of the Doctor. Now, hopefully, showing us the planet that holds the Doctor's grave isn't a sign of anything ominous to come. Hopefully, they just reused a shot. Number 20. It's a big one this week, folks. It is time for part 1 of Flood Watch, Flood Watch, Flood Watch. Mrs. Flood appears in this episode twice and is first seen spying on the Doctor while enjoying the song contest with a tub of grapes. As you do. Not popcorn, no. Not one of those slushy drinks. No, Mrs. Flood is classy. She'll have some grapes. Now, for those of you who weren't already on the Mrs. Flood is a Time Lord train, there was a killer clue right here, as the little device that she holds has what looks like a handful of Gallifreyan symbols on it. And of course, we later learn that Mrs. Flood is the Rani, a renegade Time Lord and mad scientist who has quite the history with the Doctor. But we'll get to her later. Number 19. So Rylan gets the song contest going and introduces the first singer, Liz Lizardine from the planet Lizoko. Liz Lizardine is played by Christina Rotondo, who was also the singing voice of Janice Goblin in The Church on Ruby Road. I wonder if the Goblins have ever tried submitting the Goblin song to the Interstellar Song Contest. Either way though, it wouldn't stand a chance against the mighty Dugga-doo, Dugga-doo, Dugga-Dugga, Dugga-doo. Number 18. Nina is trying to talk Kid into saving all the people floating in space, and we get the return of everyone's favourite running gag, Mavity. So in case you missed the 60th anniversary specials or you just forgot, Mavity is the new word for gravity in the Whoniverse. At the start of Wild Blue Yonder, the 14th Doctor and Donna Noble encountered Isaac Newton in 1666, right before he made his famous discovery. Newton mishearing Donna say gravity resulted in him labelling this discovery Mavity instead, and since then Mavity has been the word. Will this actually be important one day, or is this just a bit of fun? I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Number 17. Kid explains phase 3 of his plan to Nina, and one of his robot henchmen brings in a small box called a delta wave, which we later learn will broadcast a signal that kills all 3 trillion people watching the Interstellar Song Contest. The delta wave weapon is a nod to the 9th Doctor episode The Parting of the Ways, where the Doctor constructs a delta wave to use against the Dalek fleet. However, he doesn't have time to calibrate it for Daleks alone, and is unwilling to use it if it means that all the humans down on Earth will die too. Number 16. Susan Foreman is back, people. The woman who first appears to the Doctor when he's near death and floating in space is the Doctor's granddaughter, Susan. She is the original Doctor Who companion and was there in the show's very first story, 1963's An Unearthly Child. She departed in 1964's The Dalek Invasion of Earth, with the first Doctor promising that he would come back and see her one day. But he never did. Might that promise instead be fulfilled under the 15th Doctor? Now, for a deeper dive on Susan, we do actually have a video going over her history and her potential future in a bit more detail, so do make sure you go and check that out. Number 15. Sticking with Susan for a moment, there's a really nice design touch that harks back to her original appearance in the show. Her earrings very much resemble the famous large signet ring worn by the first Doctor, which popped up in a few stories before being discarded by the second Doctor. I think it's a really lovely tribute to Susan's incredible history in the show, and also to the Doctor who started it all, William Hartnell. Number 14 and number 13. So the Doctor, Gary and Mike find themselves in the Song Contests Museum, full of references to song contests from the past. There are posters for the 600th and 700th Interstellar Song Contests, as well as one or two references to ones that are a bit more closer to our time. On the wall behind some glass, you can just about see a very rare vinyl for the 1975 edition of Eurovision, which has the Dutch winners of that year, a band called Teach-In, on the cover. Now, funnily enough, Teach-In's winning song that year was called Ding a Dong, which doesn't sound a million miles away from Dugga-doo, dugga-doo, dugga-dugga-dugga-doo. There's always room for random nonsense songs at Eurovision. Now, beneath the Eurovision 75 vinyl is a poster for the 1966 edition of Eurovision, which was held in Luxembourg. Now, this poster was designed by Eurovision superfan and graphic designer Greg Benninger, who has created a whole bunch of incredible posters for different editions of Eurovision. And it was fantastic to see one of these in the episode. Number 12. Rylan isn't the only celebrity cameo in this episode, because we also get a hilarious appearance from the one and only Graham Norton. For all three of you who aren't familiar with Graham Norton, he is a chat show host here in the UK, most famous for hosting the Graham Norton Show that airs on the BBC. He's also the BBC's television commentator for the Eurovision final, so it was a no-brainer to get him in this episode, really. But what's extra special about this cameo is that it isn't actually Graham's first appearance in Doctor Who. Sort of. In the very first episode of the 2005 revival, a mistake resulted in sound from Strictly Dance Fever, which was hosted by Graham, accidentally being played over the very tense scene where Rose encounters the Autons in the basement.
Am I on the sofa or am I on the main out there?
He would then interrupt Doctor Who for a second time 5 years later when an animated banner for his show, Over the Rainbow, appeared right across Matt Smith's face during the epic cliffhanger to the Time of Angels, resulting in thousands of viewers complaining to the BBC. Graham soon apologised for this blunder on his own show, where a Dalek exterminated him as punishment. You know what, Graham? We'll call it even. We'll call it even. And now you get to be in the show properly. Number 11. So the Doctor confronts Kid in the gallery via the power of hologram, explaining that holograms are no use unless you convert them into hard light holograms, which the Doctor has done here, allowing him to torture Kid. Hard light holograms were first used in Doctor Who in the 2014 episode Mummy on the Orient Express, where many of the passengers and furnishings on the train were made of hard light holograms, designed to trick the Doctor and the rest of his group into believing they were on a normal train. Hard light holograms could also be a cheeky reference to fellow BBC sci-fi show Red Dwarf, which also features hard light holograms. Number 10. The Doctor is telling everyone his plan for how they're going to save all the frozen people floating in space. And before heading off, he yells, "Hariyama!" Now, this is the return of the 15th Doctor's catchphrase, which weirdly hasn't been heard since the Devil's Chord at the start of Season 2. Hariyama is Turkish for come on, which is very similar to 10 saying allons-y, which is French for let's go. Allons-y! Number 9. The Doctor's plan to defrost 100,000 people is underway, and we get a needle drop of a song called Making Your Mind Up by the British pop group Bucks Fizz. Now, not only is this an absolute bopper, but it fits perfectly with the Eurovision theme. This track was the UK entry for the 1981 edition of Eurovision, and it actually went on to win, which isn't something the UK does very much at Eurovision, so it was a nice touch for Doctor Who to tip the cap to Bucks Fizz. Number 8. Although the vast majority of the aliens seen throughout the episode are new creations for Doctor Who, there is one familiar face peppered among the crowds. Standing behind the 15th Doctor during Cora's song is a grey-skinned alien with pointy ears. Now, members of the same or similar species can be seen at the bar alongside Captain Jack Harkness in The End of Time Part 2, in the Maldivarium visited by River Song in the Pandorica Opens, and later on the planet Akaten in the 11th Doctor episode, The Rings of Akaten. It's one of those designs that has been wheeled out over the years whenever an extra alien is required, and it's just been subtly tweaked for its numerous appearances, but we've never actually met this alien properly. Number 7 to number 5. The Doctor and Belinda are walking through the museum on their way back to the TARDIS, and we get even more Eurovision references. Belinda first congratulates the Doctor by jokingly awarding him 12 points. 12 points is French for 12 points, which is the maximum number of points that you can achieve as a Eurovision contestant. The Doctor then responds by saying, "I thought it was my Waterloo, turns out it was my rise like a phoenix." So Waterloo is of course a nod to the truly iconic ABBA song that won the Eurovision Song Contest in 1974. And the Doctor Who ABBA connection actually goes even deeper than that, as bizarrely, Benny and Bjorn from ABBA once contacted Russell T Davies about making a Torchwood musical. Sadly though, he turned them down. I really wish we could have seen that, goddammit Russell, I really do. Meanwhile, Rise Like a Phoenix is a song by Austrian singer Conchita Wurst, and it represented Australia at the Eurovision Song Contest in 2014 and became the country's second ever win. That is until Austria won Eurovision in 2025, which aired immediately after Doctor Who on BBC One. Bit of an odd coincidence, or maybe Ncuti Gatwa actually is a time traveller, and he was leaving us a little bit of foreshadowing. Number 4. The Doctor is explaining to Belinda that his actions towards Kid were caused by the fact that so much death and destruction reminded him of his home planet Gallifrey. Now he tells her that all the Time Lords were wiped out in a single second, which is a reference to the events of Series 12, where the Master completely destroys Gallifrey before Ko-Sharmus detonates a death particle and destroys all organic life on the planet. He could also be referring to the Time War, in which Gallifrey was also destroyed, before the Doctor brought it back in his 11th incarnation. But basically, Gallifrey has been destroyed a lot, and the Doctor is sad about it, understandably. And just when you think it's back and he thinks it's safe, someone else comes and destroys it once again. Number 3. The Doctor and Belinda rush back into the TARDIS after listening to Graham's ominous message, before all the lights turn red and we hear a very iconic sound. The WhoCulture Downs noise. Some people might also call this the cloister bell, which is a sound that basically means something is wrong with the TARDIS. It was first introduced in the 1981 story Logopolis and was last heard in While Blue Yonder after Donna had spilled coffee all over the TARDIS interior. Number 2, and we're back once again for part 2 of Flood Watch, Flood Watch, Flood Watch. The episode's post-credit scene sees Mrs. Flood bi-generate into the Rani, a Time Lord first introduced in the 1985 story The Mark of the Rani. The Rani is a villainous renegade Time Lord similar to the Master, though is traditionally less obsessed with the Doctor than the Master is, and is instead more focused on her twisted scientific experiments. Though based on the fact that she's been tracking the Doctor across time and space and is determined to give him absolute terror, a reference to the line spoken by Mrs. Flood at the end of Empire of Death, it would seem that this version of the Rani, at least, is more Doctor-focused than in the past. And as I mentioned earlier, we do have a whole video focused solely on Susan and the Rani, so do make sure you go and give that a watch if you want more information about those two characters. Number 1. Sticking with the Rani, and some of her dialogue not only works as a nod to Doctor Who history, but could be a hint of things to come. The new Rani labels herself the definite article, which is the same way the 4th Doctor describes himself in his debut story, Robot, telling companion Harry Sullivan that you may be a Doctor, but I'm the Doctor. The definite article, you might say. But more relevant to current affairs is the fact that Beep the Meep also labels themselves the definite article when talking to the 14th Doctor in The Star Beast. Now this is a slight link between the Meep and the Rani that perhaps indicates that the Meep's boss, this mysterious figure mentioned at the end of The Star Beast, who is said to be interested in two-hearted beings, could be the Rani. It wouldn't be a surprise if some of these teases and plot threads from the last 2 years were paid off in the season 2 finale, and the Rani would undoubtedly be interested to hear that the Meep has encountered a two-hearted being. But we have less than 2 weeks to go until we find out for sure. Hello everybody, Ellie here for WhoCulture, and we are back with another breakdown, more Easter eggs, this time for Wish World, and there is a lot of stuff for us to cover this week. Before I start though, do make sure, if you haven't already, that you've hit the subscribe button. The big finale is coming in just a few days' time, so make sure that you also have the notification bell hit as well, so you don't miss the videos when they do get posted too. Number 34. So the cold open sees the Rani arrive in Bavaria 1865, where she does a bit of baby napping. And though we don't learn his name until later, this baby is Desiderium, the god of wishes, and member of the Pantheon alongside Sutek, the Toymaker, Lux, and others. Now the word Desiderium means an ardent desire or longing, so you can certainly see why that name was chosen for a god that can turn people's wishes and desires into reality. Furthermore, the idea of the seventh son of a seventh son possessing great power is a concept from folklore related to the fact that the number 7 has a long history of mystical and biblical significance. Think about the 7 sins, the 7 virtues, the 7 wonders of the world, etc. Interestingly, there's even historical record of seventh sons being called Doctor due to their supposed powers as healers, which is very interesting indeed. Now also in this scene, the Rani suggests that the baby needs a strong name like Sturm und Drang, and this translates to storm and stress, but more generally means turmoil. Also, I apologise for my awful German pronunciation there. Number 33. So just before the opening title sequence, we're introduced to not the Doctor, but John Smith. John Smith has been the Doctor's go-to alias for decades and was first used in the second Doctor story, The Wheel in Space, when companion Jamie gave it as his name while the Doctor was knocked unconscious. It was used quite regularly by the third Doctor during his exile on Earth and was most famously adopted by the 10th Doctor in Human Nature and the Family of Blood when he hid his true identity inside a fob watch and posed as the human schoolteacher, John Smith. Number 32 and number 31. So just after the opening title sequence, we see Conrad reading from a book called Doctor Who and the Deadly Wish. And there are a few details to discuss here. Firstly, and I'm sure many of you picked up on this right away, the design of the book is a clear riff on the iconic original UK edition of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, which was released in 1997. In addition, there are more of these books on a desk in the room with Conrad, with titles like Doctor Who and the Big Bad Wolf, Doctor Who and the Pandorica, Doctor Who and the Last Time War, Doctor Who and the Runaway Bride, Doctor Who and the English Rose, and Doctor Who and the Timeless Children. Now these books were apparently authored by I.M. Foreman, which is a very special link with Doctor Who history because I.M. Foreman owned the junkyard on Totter's Lane where the first Doctor and Susan were hiding in the very first Doctor Who story, An Unearthly Child. Number 30. The Doctor, John Smith, arrives for work at the Unified National Insurance Team, which reworks the UNIT acronym into something suitable for the Wish World, which was very nicely done, I must say. Now, the standard UNIT tower set has been transformed here into this old-fashioned and very dull-looking office space. And while the whole set is full of great touches, one of the best is very difficult to spot. So on Kate's desk at the front of the room is a framed photo of her father, Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart, one of the founding members of UNIT. That's the actual unit, by the way, not this weird insurance company rip-off version. Anyway, this picture of the Brigadier is a publicity still from the 1971 third Doctor serial The Mind of Evil, which featured the Master and revolved around a mind control device. No prizes for guessing how that relates to Wish World. Number 29. Now, while we sadly don't have Floodwatch this week, we do have the grand return of Twist Watch, Twist Watch, Twist Watch! Wish World sees the return of Susan Twist as Susan Triad, the former Angel of Death turned unit operative who is apparently really bad at making tea. So it is quite funny then that she's a tea lady in this alternate world. Now what's extra special about her appearance here is that she's wearing the exact same costume that she wore in the season 1 episode The Devil's Cord, where she was one of Sutek's Angels of Death in the 60s and was masked as a tea lady at Abbey Road Studios. Number 28 and number 27. So the Rani returns from her shopping trip to get Conrad some sandwich meat, and we get our first look inside the Bone Palace. Now on the left, as the Rani enters the main room, is the Seal of Rassilon, which she later uses to try and jog the Doctor's memory. Rassilon was one of the founders of Time Lord Society and has also served as the Lord President of Gallifrey. And his last full appearance was in the series 9 episode Hellbent, where he was stripped of his presidency by the Doctor. So if the two characters ever do meet again, things will quite possibly get quite heated. And speaking of Gallifreyan seals, the Seal of Omega can be glimpsed in a literal blink and you'll miss it shot when Conrad speaks his name during the episode's big cliffhanger. Now Omega has been seen wearing his seal in the classic series, and it's also visible in the next time trailer for the Reality War as well, so we'll have to wait and see exactly how it's relevant next week. Number 26. And sticking with the Rani, there's a neat little detail in her costuming that harks back to the original Kate O'Mara incarnation. Now in certain shots you can see that the Archie Punjabi Rani wears these large gold bangles / bracelets on her wrist, which is almost certainly a callback to the first Rani, who wore a similar item on her wrist in the classic series. Number 25. So the two Ranis head out onto the balcony for a bit of scheming, and we are introduced to the best sonic screwdriver in the show. Yep, I said it. The Rani Sonic is the best. Now, one of the reasons it's so good is the amount of thought that went into the concept and the design. Now, according to prop art director Michael Van Kesteren, it was inspired by old medical equipment to link back to the Rani being a scientist, with its white enamel syringe-like design. And even better, the red grip was added as a nod to the Rani played by Kate O'Mara in the 80s, with the design team lifting the pattern from O'Mara's Rani costume in Time and the Rani and incorporating it into the new Rani's Sonic. Meanwhile, the purple tip was inspired by Deadly Nightshade, a toxic plant which Van Kesteren described as, quote, beautiful and deadly. And you can certainly see how that fits with the Rani. Full marks for this design. No notes, it's perfect, I love it. Number 24. So folks, after Sean's cameo in the Doctor Who Unleashed episode for Space Babies, and my cameo in Lucky Day, we get another WhoTuber cameo during this conversation scene between Ruby and Shirley. Visible in the background in a few shots is Tharis, who I'm sure many of you are familiar with from his Doctor Who videos here on YouTube. You know what is really cool to see stuff like this, and there is actually a video over on his channel if you want the full story of how this cameo came to be and about his adventures on the set. Number 23. So the Doctor is sitting at the table watching some absolutely shocking television, and who should appear on the TV screen? But Rogue. Played by Jonathan Groff, Rogue first appeared in the season 1 episode of the same name and initially believed the Doctor to be the shape-shifting enemy he was tasked with hunting. Now the episode concluded with Rogue sacrificing himself by falling into some unknown dimension, but not before asking the Doctor to find me, which of course the Doctor never bothered to do. Just ask Susan. She's been waiting for him to come back for bloody ages. He does not come back. Now this cameo was actually filmed not long after the production of Rogue, so it's been in the planning for quite some time. Number 22. Ruby, Shirley and Winnie are outside the Bone Palace trying to block Conrad's signal, and Ruby has 2 flashbacks to her time with Conrad in Lucky Day. Now while the first of these flashes appeared in the episode, the second one of them walking through a park actually didn't. So this is presumably a deleted scene from Lucky Day, and based on their costumes, plus the fact that Ruby is handing Conrad the Shriek antidote, it likely takes place after the podcast recording, while they're on their way to the coffee shop in the scene that we do see. Number 21 to number 19. So the Rani is trying to instill the Doctor with doubt, and so she takes him for a waltz and tells him her backstory. Now first of all, Russell T Davies loves a villainous musical number. Think about the Saxon Master in The Sound of Drums, and The Last of the Time Lords, the Toymaker in The Giggle, and now this. Now this scene also contains a few welcome flashbacks to the original Rani, played by the marvellous Kate O'Mara. The first of these is from the 1993 charity EastEnders crossover Dimensions in Time, which puts any lingering doubt to bed. Dimensions in Time is canon. Now the second clip is from the Rani's debut story, 1985's The Mark of the Rani, while the third is from 1987's Time and the Rani, during the opening scene where the 6th Doctor regenerates into the 7th. Or more accurately, where Sylvester McCoy in a blonde wig regenerated into Sylvester McCoy without a blonde wig. Number 18. So the Rani has used the Doctor's doubt to shatter reality and break the Earth apart, and we see buildings and cars falling in all kinds of crazy directions as Ruby, Shirley and Winnie watch on. Now on the side of one of these buildings is the name Gestetta, and if that rings a bell, that's because Gestetta is also the name of the mining company in the season 2 episode The Well. So it's not unreasonable that an early version of the company existed on contemporary Earth and survived all the way through to the year 500,000 on the planet Midnight. I mean, after all, Magpie Electricals from the Idiot's Lantern ended up in all sorts of crazy places, including Starship UK in the 33rd century. Stranger things have happened. Number 17, Omega returns. Omega is one of the very first Time Lords and was responsible for gifting the Time Lords the ability to travel in time. He was then lost and forgotten in an antimatter dimension and grew angry and vengeful towards the Time Lords during this time. Now, his brief voice lines that we can hear in Wishworld have actually been taken from the big Finnish audio drama Gallifrey Intervention Earth, which was released in 2015. And this does make me slightly concerned that they don't actually have an Omega actor lined up for the reality war, and he's just going to be some huge CGI monster in a similar vein to Sutekh, although Sutekh did have a voice. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Now, for a full, proper deep dive into Omega and some theories about what might be next, make sure that you check out our Ending Explained video that we dropped a few days ago that goes all through Omega and what he's about. Number 16 to number 1. Another week, another whole load of Doctor cameos. So as with the story in the engine, Wishworld plays us a clip show of every past Doctor, starting with a shot of William Hartnell's first Doctor from the 1966 serial The Massacre. Well, technically this isn't the first Doctor. This was Hartnell playing a second role in that serial. In this case, the Abbot of Amboise, who was a physical double of the first Doctor. And it actually gets a bit weirder because there's actually no surviving footage of the massacre available to use. This particular shot was included at the end of 2023's The Daleks in Colour as a teaser for future colorizations. So it was made solely for that purpose. It does make you wonder why, out of all the first Doctor footage they could have gone with, they used a shot that isn't of the first Doctor, and is also from a fully missing serial. Anyway, the next shot is of Patrick Troughton's second Doctor from the early 1970s serial The Three Doctors, which is a very fitting reference as this was also the first appearance of the mighty Omega. John Pertwee's third Doctor is up next, looking very heaven-scenty, I might add, and this shot is taken from the 1972 serial Day of the Daleks, and it's been graded much differently for its cameo here, presumably to make it look more cinematic and fit in with the rest of the episode and these other shots just a little bit better. Now this is followed by Tom Baker as the fourth Doctor from the closing moments of the 1978 serial The Invasion of Time. It's also one of Doctor Who's earliest fourth wall breaks, with the fourth Doctor grinning right down the camera after getting a new version of K9, K9 Mark II. Now, after a brief cut back to the 15th Doctor in Wishworld, we then see Peter Davison as the 5th Doctor in the 1983 crossover story The Five Doctors, during the scene where he's been brainwashed by fellow Time Lord Barusa. We then jump to Colin Baker's 6th Doctor in the 1985 serial Vengeance on Varos, and then to Sylvester McCoy's 7th Doctor in the 1989 story The Curse of Fenric. Up next is the 8th Doctor, and it would seem that the BBC is either reluctant to use or can't use footage from Paul McGann's main TV story, the 1996 TV movie. Now, in the story in the engine, his clip was taken from the 2013 minisode The Night of the Doctor, while his clip here is from the Guardians of the Edge sequence in Jodie Whittaker's final story, The Power of the Doctor. Now, next we see John Hurt as the War Doctor in the 50th anniversary special The Day of the Doctor. And his placement here indicates that these flashes are in timeline order and not in the order they first appeared in the show. Although Joe Martin's clip cameo later in the scene would appear to disagree with that, so confusion. We then jump to the 2005 revival properly, with a shot of the 9th Doctor from the end of his very first episode Rose, during the scene where he tries to convince Rose to travel with him. The 10th Doctor follows on in a shot from the 2008 episode Forest of the Dead, and this again is from right at the end of the episode during the scene where he opens the TARDIS by snapping his fingers. Next up, Matt Smith's 11th Doctor breaks the fourth wall in the closing seconds of the series 6 finale The Wedding of River Song, which gives us 2 River Song episodes back to back here. Just saying. We then see Peter Capaldi as the 12th Doctor in the Series 9 episode Before the Flood, who has just been told by Clara that he's died and turned into a ghost, so That's cheerful. Jodie Whittaker's 13th Doctor then chats with her fam at the end of her second episode, The Ghost Monument, before we see a shot of Jo Martin as the fugitive Doctor from the 2020 episode Fugitive of the Judoon, which, as mentioned earlier, is quite interesting. If these clips were in timeline order, then you'd expect Jo Martin to appear first. Or if they were in show order, you'd expect John Hurt to appear after Matt Smith. Perhaps they just didn't want to cause any controversy by putting Jo Martin before William Hartnell. Perhaps Russell has other ideas about where Jo Martin fits in the timeline. Or perhaps we're reading too much into the order of these clips. Probably that one. And lastly, we see David Tennant again as the 14th Doctor in his very first scene at the end of The Power of the Doctor. And now it's time for the bonus round, which is basically just some extra things that we noticed that don't necessarily qualify as proper Easter eggs, but we wanted to talk about anyway. So first of all, this episode has major WandaVision vibes, and Russell T Davies actually discussed WandaVision in Doctor Who magazine issue 605, so it was probably on his mind while writing this story. This one's a little bit sad and a little bit funny at the same time, but it seems that in every single timeline, Carla abandons Ruby in some form. Poor Ruby. The drone guards in this episode are the same ones we saw in the Interstellar Song Contest, so it seems that the Rani thought, I like you guys, you can come with me on my mission. We also see these clone-type classiforms, and they're credited as Seekers. Now, to me, they look very Borg-like, and we know Russell T Davies is a fan of Star Trek, so I wouldn't be surprised if he made that decision when thinking about what these creatures would look like. They also reminded me of the controller in Bad Wolf. I think it's the repetitiveness of the numbers really made me think of that character. Now, interestingly, this is one of the only stories in the show's history where the TARDIS doesn't appear. This hasn't happened since Ascension of the Cybermen in 2020. And also something very funny, the Vlinx, who you'd usually see sat in Unit HQ, is so useless that they've just put him in a box in this episode. I mean, we all know I'm not the biggest fan of the Vlinx, I think it's a little bit ridiculous, but I did think it was quite funny that in this reality, he had no purpose whatsoever and was just boxed up in the corner. Hello everybody, Ellie here for WhoCulture, and we made it! We made it to the end of Season 2. Just because Season 2 is over doesn't mean the merch is disappearing. In fact, it's at the bottom of every single video. Just look down below the video and there's a link to our shop, and you could get yourself one of these bad boys. So, get on it! Get on it, people! That's so cool, right? Anyway, I digress. Shall we get into the breakdown and Easter eggs for the reality war? Number 41. So after last week's cliffhanger, the Doctor is falling to his certain doom, only to be rescued by Anita. Now, if for some reason you didn't catch the 2024 Christmas special Joy to the World, Anita was the manager of an ordinary Earth hotel in London before she became good friends with the Doctor, and then he got her a job at the Time Hotel, which contains many, many doors to different points in time. Now, the bulk of Joy to the World takes place in 4202, and in the reality war, Anita says it's still 4202. So she'd kind of been in her new role for that long. Quite honestly, I wouldn't mind if Anita popped up every now and then and just kind of became this recurring character like Captain Jack or River Song, because it was really great to see her back. Number 40. So the day resets back to the start of May the 23rd, and Ruby and Belinda wake up at their homes to repeat the cycle. And on Ruby's bedroom walls, you can see lots of posters, a couple of which are for a band called HL3. Now, HL3 is a band within the Whoniverse that has also been seen in the show before. Specifically, earlier this season, when the Robot Revolution also featured a HL3 poster on the wall in Belinda's shared home. Also, on Ruby's wall is a poster that says Midnight, which we are also going to count as a reference to Season 2 because, come on. Number 39 to number 37. So Anita tells the Doctor that on her days off, she goes looking for him, and we get something that's become quite common in Doctor Who in recent weeks. Clip cameos. So the first of these is from the Series 6 finale, The Wedding of River Song, a highly underrated episode, I might add. And it's from the scene where the 11th Doctor plays a deadly game of chess with Mark Gatiss' character Gantok. Now, The Wedding of River Song was written by Stephen Moffat, so I'm wondering if this was a little tip of the cap to him, as he also wrote Joy to the World and created the character of Anita. Next, we get our first proper Dalek appearance in the 15th Doctor's era, and also sadly the last. This third Doctor clip is from the 1972 serial Day of the Daleks, taken from a sequence where the Doctor is held captive by the Daleks. Does this mean that the 15th Doctor did actually get a Dalek story? Does this count? I'm not sure. And lastly, we see the intimate dance sequence from the season 1 episode Rogue, which tells Anita that perhaps she doesn't stand as much of a chance with the Doctor as she initially thought. Number 36 and number 35. So the Doctor asks Susan Triad to build a large cube-like structure, which we later learn is called a zero room, designed to exist outside of reality so it can preserve Poppy even when the wish comes to an end. Now the concept of the zero room was first introduced in the 5th Doctor's debut story Castrovalva, where the Doctor used a zero room on board the TARDIS to essentially have a bit of a post-regeneration nap in a tranquil room where all outside interference and signals were blocked. When the Doctor pulls up the plans for the Zero Room, we can also see reference to an Artron field on the right-hand side. Now, Artron energy is a form of energy or radiation that exists within the time vortex, and it's featured in Doctor Who a lot over the decades. And it was first mentioned in the 4th Doctor serial, The Deadly Assassin, in 1976. Now, often whenever the script calls for a generic science-y energy thing, it's usually Artron. Artron energy, Artron signals, that sort of thing. But most importantly, this is also where we got our name for our Artron ups from. Number 34. So Kate returns from changing out of her tweed outfit and announces to the room Gold Protocol's Doctor on the Bridge. Gold Protocol was first mentioned in The Giggle and reappeared in The Legend of Ruby Sunday. And it appears to be something to do with the Doctor's presence, because Kate only ever initiates Gold Protocol whenever the Doctor is around. So it likely means that the Doctor now has complete authority over the current situation, which does make sense because he's technically still the President of the Earth, a job title he first assumed in the series 8 finale Death in Heaven back in 2014. Number 33. So the gang is assembled at Unit HQ and the Doctor tells them all about the villainous fellow Time Lord, the Rani. And Mel responds that she fought the Rani when she originally travelled with the Doctor all those years ago, which is a reference to her adventure with the 7th Doctor in 1987's Time and the Rani, where the Rani actually impersonated Mel in an effort to trick the Doctor. There's also the fun little detail in the scene of Mel's hair returning to frizzy mode, which is surely a callback to the mad curly hair worn by Mel during her classic appearances, including Time and the Rani. Number 32. So the Doctor questions how the Rani got to Earth without a TARDIS. Now, did anyone else think that she was going to show him a vortex manipulator here? Just me? I honestly thought that's what... In fact, I said it out loud. Vortex manipulator, and then it wasn't. What it actually was is a time ring, which is a small time travel device first introduced in the 1975 serial Genesis of the Daleks, where one is given to the 4th Doctor so he can escape from Skaro once his mission to destroy the Daleks is complete. Also, the Doctor's saying that he has the only TARDIS in existence. Is he forgetting about the 14th Doctor's TARDIS that's just parked in Donna's back garden? He literally was the one that created it back in The Giggle. Although, to be fair to him, a lot has happened since then, so maybe he just forgot. Number 31 and number 30. So the Rani reiterates that her plan is to explore the Underverse to find Omega, to which the Doctor responds by describing the Underverse as the world hidden below. He then goes on to compare it to several other places. The first of these being the Upside Down, which is a reference to the dark alternate dimension featured in the Netflix TV show Stranger Things. He also compares the Underverse to Narnia, the fantasy world created by C.S. Lewis for his Chronicles of Narnia book series. This is funny when you remember that the Doctor actually visited a Narnia-like realm in the 2011 Christmas special, The Doctor, the Widow and the Wardrobe, and that it wasn't remotely a fun time, with acid rain and creepy wood monsters galore. So maybe he's still not quite over that whole ordeal. Number 29. Immediately after, Kate says that my father fought Omega back in the 1970s, which is a reference to her father, Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart's role in the 1972-1973 serial The Three Doctors, Omega's first appearance in the show. Number 28. Unit enters battle mode against the Bone Beasts, and the Doctor hurriedly tells Mel to power up the Indigo device for Ruby so she can go and stop Conrad. Project Indigo was first introduced in the Series 4 finale The Stolen Earth, where it was an experimental and unstable teleportation device used by Martha Jones to escape the Dalek massacre. Fortunately, it was just about stable enough to transport her safely, although she could have just as easily been scattered into atoms. Though unstable back in those days, UNIT has clearly perfected the technology by the time of the reality war, as Ruby is able to bounce about all over the place with pinpoint precision. Number 27. So the Battle of the Bone Beasts is underway and Kate orders for the double galvanic beams to be fired. Now the Doctor knows firsthand how devastating the galvanic beam can be, as it was this very same weapon that killed the 14th Doctor and triggered his bigeneration into the 15th Doctor. Now it appears that the weapon has had a bit of an upgrade since the giggle as well, having been changed from a single galvanic beam to a double galvanic beam. And this isn't the only connection with galvanic energy this season either, as the planet Midnight, featured in The Well, is said to be flooded with galvanic radiation, rendering its surface deadly and uninhabitable. Number 26. So after Omega emerges from the Underverse and snacks on the Rani, Mrs. Flood steals her time ring and quips, "So much for the two Ranis. It's a good night from me." This is a reference to the 1970s and 80s British comedy sketch show The Two Ronnies, which starred comedians Ronnie Corbett and Ronnie Barker. They would close out every show with Ronnie Corbett saying, "It's a good night from me," and Barker following with, "And a good night from him."
That's all we've got time for this evening, so it's good night from me.
And it's good night from him. Good night.
Now, this being Russell T Davies, it was only a matter of time before we got a two Ranis, two Ronnies joke. And no doubt many of you were ticking this off your bingo cards when it happened. And I hope this clears that up for any viewers who were left confused by this reference. I know there were some comments on the ups and downs of people not understanding that reference, so hopefully that clears that up for you. Number 25. So the Doctor and the unit gang are discussing the fate of Conrad Clark, and Mel reveals that she's found a video he posted online. Now this social media overlay that we see on screen features several fake social media profiles, including one for a user called Cheryl.Smith who lives in Cardiff, which is Doctor Who's home base. Now as we mentioned in our Lucky Day video, because this detail also appeared in that episode as well, the profile picture for Cheryl.Smith is the real life profile picture of Doctor Who graphic designer Georgie O'Boy. Now Georgie assumedly worked on the designs of these social media overlays and decided to insert her own profile picture. And then when they needed something similar for the reality war, they just reused what they had. Now Georgie also designed many of the graphics seen on the unit desk screens, including the teal that's a little too blue. Number 24. And sticking with this final unit scene, this one's only visible in an official promo image, but on Kate's desk is a file with the name Prentice printed on the side. Now Prentice, also known as the Grand Serpent, was a villainous alien character in Series 13 who infiltrated UNIT right from its very creation and would assassinate anyone who got in his way. Now at some point during her UNIT career, Kate discovered his sinister intentions and vowed to stop him, which she ultimately did, stranding him on an asteroid with no hope of escape. So it does make sense for Kate to have a file on Prentice, as someone like him would of course need to be documented in case there's a need of future reference. Number 23 to number 8. So as we mentioned earlier, there have been quite a lot of clip cameos in recent weeks. So of course the reality war includes one as well. The Doctor has realised that he must regenerate to bring Poppy back, and so the TARDIS shows him scenes of his previous faces, presumably to remind him of where he came from and that life as the Doctor does go on. Now the first clip that appears is of the first Doctor in part 2 of the 1965 serial The Space Museum, taken from the ending sequence where the Doctor chats with Lobos. Now this shot has actually been colorized as well, as the original was broadcast in black and white. Next up is the second Doctor in the 1972/1973 serial, The Three Doctors. Whoever chooses these clips clearly likes The Three Doctors, as Troughton's clip last week was also from The Three Doctors. The Three Doctors was the first appearance of Omega, so it's a fitting story to reference here. This is followed by a brief shot of John Pertwee from the 1972 serial The Time Monster, taken from part 6, where the third Doctor confronts the extra-dimensional creature Kronos. After a cut back to the 15th Doctor, the clip show resumes with Tom Baker's fourth Doctor in the 1977 serial The Invisible Enemy, with a very brightly coloured scarf, I might add. The fifth Doctor is up next, who teleports away from the Cybermen in a scene from the 1983 20th anniversary celebration, The Five Doctors. Colin Baker's sixth Doctor then appears, and this one was very tricky to identify, but based on his stance and the length of his hair, this appears to be from some of the courtroom scenes in the 1986 story The Trial of a Time Lord, which is swiftly followed by a shot of Sylvester McCoy's seventh Doctor from the very end of the 1989 serial Survival, which was the final serial in classic Doctor Who. Jumping to the 8th Doctor and deep into the revival era, this is a shot from the 2022 episode The Power of the Doctor during the Guardians of the Edge sequence, in which 13 encounters some of her past incarnations. John Hurt's War Doctor is up next in a clip from his only TV appearance in the 50th anniversary special The Day of the Doctor, and this is from the scene midway through the episode where our heroes discover what the Zygons are up to. We continue in Doctor order with the 9th Doctor, and this is a clip from right at the start of the Series 1 finale, The Parting of the Ways, where the Doctor encounters the Dalek Emperor. Now, it's interesting that there's a clip from The Parting of the Ways in the same episode where Billie Piper appears out of nowhere with a golden glow. The 10th Doctor is next in a shot from the end of the Series 4 episode Forest of the Dead, where he opens the TARDIS doors with a snap of his fingers. This is also the exact same clip that was used during the Doctor montage in Wishworld last week as well. I'm all for recycling, but come on. It's not like there's a shortage of different shots to use, especially for 10. Next we see the 11th Doctor in the 2011 Christmas special The Doctor, the Widow and the Wardrobe, followed by the 12th Doctor shortly after his arrival inside his confession dial in the 2015 episode Heaven Sent. Next we see Jodie Whittaker as the 13th Doctor, and not for the last time in this episode either. This is a shot from her run-in with the Fugitive Doctor in Fugitive of the Jadoon, who then appears in the clip show herself, putting on her glasses while saying goodbye to the 13th Doctor in The Power of the Doctor. And last but not least, we have the 14th Doctor in a scene from the very end of The Star Beast as he watches Rose and Donna just let the meta-crisis go. Now, interestingly, this sequence ends with the TARDIS scanner glitching between shots of the Fugitive Doctor, the 13th Doctor, and the 14th Doctor, as though it's choosing which Doctor will appear to help 15 through his regeneration. And of course, we all know what happens next. Number 7 to number 4, Jodie Whittaker is back! The 13th Doctor appears due to the 15th Doctor wreaking havoc on the timeline, and helps her future self through his impending regeneration. And there are a couple of fun references in this scene. So first off, the 15th Doctor responds to her appearance by quipping, "I'm surprised it's not the other guy, he is always turning up." This is a surprisingly self-aware nod to David Tennant's many appearances in Doctor Who. And to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if Russell had also considered giving him a call for this scene right here as well. Immediately after this, 13 looks around the TARDIS interior and tells 15, "You've redecorated." "I don't like it." Now, this is a common phrase for past incarnations to use whenever they get a glimpse inside their future incarnation's TARDIS. It was said by the 10th Doctor in The Day of the Doctor, and even goes all the way back to the classic series with the 2nd Doctor's comment to the 3rd Doctor in The Three Doctors, "I can see you've been doing the TARDIS up a bit. I don't like it." A little later in the scene, 13 delivers some insanely complicated technobabble to the 15th Doctor, which they both immediately describe as timey-wimey. This is the return of one of the Doctor's most iconic phrases, first coined by the 10th Doctor in the 2007 episode Blink, and used many times since.
Wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey.
It almost feels like a rite of passage for a Doctor to say timey-wimey at some point. And not only does this scene tick that box for Ncuti Gatwa, it does so for Jodie Whittaker too, because she never got to say it during her original run. The sequence ends with the 13th Doctor realising she should say "I love you" to Yaz, only for 15 to tell her that she never does. Now, this is a nod to the fan-ship-turned-show canon Phasmin, the relationship between the 13th Doctor and her companion Yasmin Khan, which was never actually meant to be a thing in the show, but later began to be explored when the producers saw a load of buzz about it online. Now, 13 and Yaz are set to return in a new series of Big Finish audio dramas starting in July, so hopefully they hadn't already recorded something that contradicts what we learn here. Number 3. So the Doctor is introduced to Belinda's mum, who believes he's an actual doctor and informs him that "I have this pain down my left side every time I turn corners." Now, any Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy fans will have immediately clocked that this is a fun tip of the cap to Marvin the Paranoid Android, the iconic robot featured in the series, who complains that "I've got this terrible pain in all the diodes down my left-hand side." The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy was created by Douglas Adams, who served as Doctor Who's script editor during season 17 of the classic series, and also wrote stories like City of Death and The Pirate Planet. Russell T Davies is no doubt a big fan of Adams' work, so you can bet that he was absolutely hooting while writing this line. Number 2. As the 15th Doctor heads out the TARDIS doors to begin his regeneration, you might be wondering why he randomly strikes up a conversation with a star in the distance. Well, this is another callback to the 2024 Christmas special, Joy to the World, which concluded with the Doctor's temporary companion Joy merging with a starseed and becoming a literal star in the sky. Now, I don't think many of us expected 15's final moments, including one of his final lines, Joy to the World, to connect so heavily with the recent Christmas special. But it's nonetheless a fitting sentiment for a Doctor who is known for being an emotional, high-energy, beaming ray of sunshine. Honestly, he will be missed. And number 1, of course, the episode closes with the 15th Doctor regenerating into a very familiar face indeed. Billie Piper. Piper, of course, played the very first companion of the 2005 revival, Rose Tyler, and as such helped catapult the show to success, and is one of the reasons it's still on our screens today. Now, interestingly, she isn't introduced as the Doctor in the closing credits, as is usually the case when the new actor appears on the closing end of a regeneration. Even David Tennant got an Introducing David Tennant as the Doctor credit in The Power of the Doctor, so the lack of one here is notable. Honestly, let us know your theories in the comments down below, and do keep your eyes on the channel because we may do a standalone Billie Piper theories video in the coming weeks. And now it's time for the bonus round, which is basically just some extra little things that we noticed that we weren't sure entirely qualified as proper Easter eggs. Now, in our Wish World review, I mentioned that the Rani looked like the Green Goblin zooming around on her hoverboard, and in the YouTube behind the scenes, Ncuti Gatwa says the exact same thing about himself riding the hoverboard this week. Great minds, you know? Great minds think alike. The TARDIS finally got a chair! Now, a big plot point in Joy to the World was that the TARDIS is big and lonely and how there isn't even a chair. But this episode, there was a chair! Cherry Sunday finally got her cup of tea. Took 2 seasons, but she got there. We have another Murray Gold callback, so the music that plays as Poppy's coat shrinks down is also used in The Doctor Falls when 12 is dying, and then again as he talks to Nardole and Bill before regeneration in Twice Upon a Time. Now, this track doesn't have an official title because it would have been featured on the Series 10 soundtrack, which was never released, which is a tragedy. And the boss. Who is the boss? We've had the boss mentioned by the Meep, by Rogue, now by Anita. Could it be Susan? Could it be the Master? Could it be Mrs. Flood as the Rani? Honestly, who knows? There are still questions to be answered, people. And there you have it, folks. There is our full breakdown, all the Easter eggs that we noticed in the Reality War, and that brings a close to our breakdowns of Season 2 episodes. Thank you so much for sticking with me over the last 8 weeks. I've really enjoyed doing these videos, and I hope you've enjoyed watching them. Until the next time, I've been Ellie for WhoCulture, and in the words of Riversong herself, goodbye, sweeties.